Spokeswoman Tammy Barker became the proud mother of a bouncing baby spokeschild last night. According to spokespeople, Barker, a spokeswoman for a Tacoma-based pharmaceutical firm, the birthing process was a major success. Peter Wahlberg, spokesman for Tammy's husband Phil, had this to say.
At 9:17 p.m. last night, an 8.5-month-old spokes fetus was delivered alive, and through the miracle of birth became a 7-pound, 6-ounce spokes child. Spokes father and spokes mother are doing fine.
Spokeswoman Barker is expected to be released from St. Robert's Hospital tomorrow. The spokes child will remain in the hospital's media care unit for several weeks of training. Doyle Redland for the Onion Radio News, online at theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Yes, it is Free Talk Live. Live from New Hampshire. It's Saturday night. With special musical guests, Captain Kickass. Although he won't be doing any music or singing or playing anything.
And your host, Dave Chappelle.
A musical guest.
I'm just here, and I'm not really even a guest, really. I guess in the first chair. I'm kind of required, so I don't know what I'm saying.
You should name your band something else, so then you can introduce your band as the musical guest, and it would still just be you, but it would also be like Captain Kickass and the Freedom Fighters or whatever.
Yeah. Talk about a one-man show.
My favorite...
On bass, Captain Kickass.
I play guitar.
On guitar, Captain Kickass.
My favorite sort of like something and something you like. It's the guy and then like the name of the backup band is I learned this from Dr. Demento. It's Tom T-Bone Stankus. Stankus is his actual last name. Tom T-Bone Stankus.
Ow.
And the Front Porch Rockers.
Nice.
The Front Porch Rockers, I think,
That's
is the
hilarious.
greatest, like, band, second, and my band, the Front Porch Rockers, right? Like, I think that is just such a great band name. And it's too bad they took it because, man, I really wanted to take that.
Now, if you could run into problems picking these names, and then forever on down the line telling people that my name's not Hootie.
Hootie and the Blowchunks. That was my name for that particular outfit when they came out because I just really didn't like them. Yeah. There's something. Can you talk into your mic?
A little bit.
There's a little something going on there.
I got gremlins.
Yeah. We'll look at that during the break. Let's just make sure. I believe I found the problem and solved it just in those 2 seconds.
All right.
So
Loose cables.
Yeah. Bad connections are bad audio, and we don't like that here on Free Talk Live. What we do like is...
Do we have creamy radio audio? Or whatever that was.
Bad audio is a hate crime. Right? Wasn't that...
something like that.
Wasn't it Michael Dean's bit?
Yeah.
His slogan, if you will.
As opposed to
no, you
crunchy
didn't fix
audio?
it.
No.
Yeah.
That is weird. All right.
So I guess I got crunchy audio.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, you're crunchy.
Yeah.
I come from a long line of captains, right? Crunch, Picard, Kirk, right? Kangaroo. Like there are several captains who precede me. So, although Captain Kickass is older than, it's not really older than the internet, but it's older than the commonly adopted internet, right? Because I had that nickname before, like during the forums days, right? Like before MySpace.
It was your handle.
Yeah, it was my handle, yes. Because the first rule of the internet, of course, was don't put any of your real, quote-unquote, real stuff online. Your name, your address, your phone. Don't be dumb like some of these people. I still see it to this day on like the Facebook or the Twitter or whatever social media platform you happen to be on. Oh, hey, everybody, I just want to let you know we're going on vacation in 2 weeks. We're going to be gone for 2 weeks, and we'll be on a boat. And, we've got somebody babysitting the dogs, and, we're just tidying up the house to make sure nothing goes wrong while we're away for 2 weeks. I'm like, could you just paint a big target on your back?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and tell us what the address is so that we know where to rob while you're gone for 2 weeks.
Yeah. It's
well, keep talking. Don't not talk because I'm doing a thing.
I just didn't want you to break it because you were slamming on it.
You said smack it.
I was that was the signal to like check the plug.
Oh.
Yeah, like
Is that what that signal is?
I was doing this, not this, Richie Rich. For those of you folks at home who can't
No, that is
see
for
what we
checking
were doing,
coaxial cable.
we were gesturing a male and female connector is what we were gesturing with our hands here in the studio.
Well, there's a male and female connector right there.
I wasn't doing it in a way that was meant to be dirty, and then Richie Rich, of course, took and ran with it and made it dirty. Yeah. In the studio tonight, it is myself, the Reverend Captain Kickass, joining me.
Beakless Mountaineer.
And Richie Rich.
So what did we title the show today? I don't even remember.
I don't know. I wasn't
Libertarianism.
titling it.
Oh, libertarian philosophy, dangerous?
Dangerous.
Dangerous? Quote unquote. We'll get to that, but first, I want to
People
talk.
might start thinking. Who knows what they're going to do when they do that?
I was thinking about,
I want everyone to think for themselves. That way more people will think like me.
but how do you get people from the place that they're at to begin thinking for themselves?
Threats and violence.
Bribery.
Well, no, that's the wrong way.
Oh, okay.
Like
Well, what Pikla said then.
bribery?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, this is a
Here's
legitimate
$10.
question
Would you
that
please
comes
start
up from
thinking for
time to time.
yourself?
Well, no, seriously, like, why bother learning economics? I mean, it's a pain. So why would you
most people
bother?
don't.
Right. Most people are not interested in it in the first place.
Yeah.
So they would have to become interested in economics in order to learn economics. And why would you do that? Well, if it's the difference between being rich and being poor, that's why.
Yeah, quite honestly, what got me looking into just money, right? We'll call it economics, but I mean, like, well, what is money?
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're like, oh, it's dollars. Well, no, because money is a global thing.
Not even the dollar's a dollar.
Right. It's
the dollar has a definition. That's like in the federal code, and it's not what you carry in your pocket.
Yeah. It's a human construct, or at least a primate construct, because even primates will use things like rocks or colored stones and that kind of thing as a weird.
Well, as
form
I
of
understand, it
currency.
was meat that usually gets used.
Right. But coming back to the dollar, I read this week. Since gold has now reached its all-time high.
Yeah! Woo!
This week of, what was it, 2000?
Finally broke 2,000 for the month.
Yeah, it was 2000.
Because, like, it would pop up over
50
2,000 for a day and then immediately crash back down.
Yeah.
Like a few times.
But since that happened, what that means is that your $1 US today is worth a penny compared to the US dollar pre-1913. So in 1912, right, before the first steps of taking the dollar off the gold standard, right, you're holding on to a penny.
Yeah.
From the OG dollar back when it was actually pegged to gold.
Right.
When it actually was backed by something of value.
There was another headline this week, similar vein, but more in to do with inflation.
Yeah.
That the individuals now, in order to maintain the same standard of living they had in just 2021, need $11,000 more this year than 2 years ago to maintain the same standard of living.
Have you gone grocery shopping? Have you, paid your electric bill recently?
My electric bill's like pretty
but
regular.
like, have you gone out to a restaurant?
Yeah, no, because I can't afford it anymore.
I was reading something on, I think it was maybe the Twitter. I'm not sure where it was, but somebody posted, took a family of 6, 2 adults, 4 children to like Panera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was $76. And like in my head, I'm like, well, that seems cheap.
For Panera? Okay.
I mean, for like, if I go out, I mean, granted, I'm drinking alcohol, right? So like, if I'm going to have a cocktail, right? I'm going to order my meal, and that's like $50.
Yeah.
Right? No matter where I go, I can go to a chain, I can go to mom and pop. I mean, almost everywhere I go, it's right around the $50 mark. That used to be $20 some time ago.
Mm-hmm. Dinner for 2 at McDonald's is like $30 now for 2 adults.
That's what I mean. Like the fast food is almost as expensive as the sit-down chains. Like, what can and then
what happened?
And then Biden's all like, "Oh yeah, there's no inflation."
No,
BS.
it's Putin's. Yeah, it's Putin's price hike.
And my boss ignorant to these things, right, will like literally tell the employees that asking for a raise is what's causing all this inflation.
Oh, God.
Like it's your higher wages that's what's making this spiral out of control.
You see, it's having a cart behind the horse
Yeah.
that makes the horse go forward. That's how it works.
I have called them out on this, because I don't care. But to prepare, and I don't know if he's doing it on purpose, right? Because if he's doing it on purpose, so he doesn't have to give raises to a whole bunch of people, like tactically well played, right? But I think he's just ignorant.
No,
and doesn't
most
know how to
likely
explain it.
he is repeating the talking points of the media that he consumes.
And PR.
Because that is one of the places that they will point the finger of inflation is, it's all those workers demanding wages. And another place is, it's all those prices that that the greedy corporate overlords are raising.
Well, that's what Biden said this week.
Yeah.
Right? Inflation is down. You guys start lowering your prices.
It's like, shoot, man, I knew it. I knew we had this golden age where all of the corporate overlords were just not greedy.
Yeah.
And I guess that's over
Let's
now.
get back to that.
Let's see if I can find the quote from Biden. Any corporation that has not brought their prices back down, even as inflation has come down, even as the supply chains have been rebuilt, it's time to stop price gouging. Dear Mr. Biden.
Stop gaslighting us.
Right?
If you're going to be a leader...
Jerk.
If you're going to be a leader, then lead, and you go ahead and reduce the government tax burden on everybody else first.
Right.
Stop raising your frickin' prices for the non-services that we never asked for, we don't want, we don't frickin' need.
Please, master.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you didn't lower your prices back down to what they used to be, has that ever happened in history?
Why don't you lower the military budget back down to 1913 levels, Mr. Biden? Give us all a break.
Right? Like, my whole experience of the dollar has been post-1913, and I look at all of that time, it just keeps getting more expensive. Everything, every price goes up. And here he is pretending that's not the case.
Well, generally everything goes up in aggregate, and then you have like the technology sector, where as technologies advance, right, they can reduce the prices because they gain economies of scale, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But that's against the inflationary pressures.
Right.
So it would be even lower without those pressures.
Yeah. And that really is the uncountable theft that they've made is we can count, I can estimate that, this basket of goods has gone up 10% or what have you. But what I can't count is how much would it have gone down?
Yeah.
I have no idea how cheap things would have been if they were not stealing from us by printing money.
Yeah, when the flat screen LED TVs came out, they were, $1,000? Thereabouts, a little more than that, right?
Yeah, now they're sub 200 on Black Friday.
Yeah, you can get $200 50-inch LED TV, but how much cheaper would it be if it weren't acting against the rest of that pressure? Right? Would it be $50?
Right?
Who knows?
Yeah. How cheap would cars be?
Right.
If A, they didn't have ridiculous regulations forcing them to be a certain size if they're going to be a certain thing, and B, if they weren't being priced in this thing that keeps getting printed.
Medical care is so bloated because of government regulations that it is easily a factor of 10x of what it should be. And you can do a little bit of math on this yourselves. I was told there'd be no math here, but do it at home by just comparing the regular medical industrial complex and their fees, your insurance, the procedures, all the stuff and compare that to the almost completely free market of eye care.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you have, it's still a medical procedure. It's still a medical industry, right? But hardly regulated at all by way of comparison.
Right.
And eye care is easy, convenient, fast. It's everywhere. I could walk 5 minutes down the road and get an eye test if I need one. So how much cheaper would everything else be if it also were as unregulated as some of these other healthcare items?
You have these fights over, do I have the right to try an insufficiently tested medical treatment when I'm going to die? That is what we're fighting over. Will you let me try this insufficiently tested thing when I have run out of other options, when what we could have is just let people try what they want.
Let me ask you a question about the eye care and the dental thing.
Okay.
Right, because for whatever reason, those two items are generally excluded from company-provided medical care. And there are people from your medical insurance that you get through your employer.
They can be, yes.
Okay. And
having worked in tech, they generally were included but they were a separate item for sure. Right. It wasn't like one thing. There was like, we give you full medical, and then we also have dental and vision. Right. Yeah. It was definitely a bonus.
And the reason for this is that the insurance companies are not required to include optical.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Is that a good thing for the optical industry and the optical consumer that it hasn't been bundled in by requirement for all these years, which is why you can get it fast, cheap, easy, and convenient?
Well, I don't know if that's what impact that has on the industry.
Oh, it's definitely part of it, is because you have a free floating
price
pricing.
Low. It's a good question.
Like instead of the price of that going up with everything else, because that's part of it, is that, oh well, how much is it to get a hearing aid?
Yeah.
Well, I will never know, because that is being bundled in with all of this other stuff, and it's being overly regulated.
Yeah.
So if I could separate that out, then we might find out how much that particular thing costs.
On hearing aids, you might find out soon. You can get hearing aids over the counter now.
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
That was a joke, yes.
I know.
Yeah, okay.
That's why I ignored the joke and focused on Peakless's actual
You could have given it like a half giggle or something.
Okay, back to you, Peakless.
All right, Santa Richie. Let's go to some of your calls and thoughts. Unscreened caller, you're on Free Talk Live. What's your name, please?
Hey, this is Zephin.
Hey, Zephin. You're live on the radio. What's on your mind?
So I just wanted to call about AFP National's decision recently to endorse Nikki Haley.
Who and what?
The Americans for Prosperity.
Well, yeah, okay, thank you for explaining the acronym to our listeners. Americans for Prosperity have what now? They said Nikki Haley's their girl?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've endorsed Nikki Haley, which is really disappointing because Americans for Prosperity is supposed to be a libertarian group. It's supposed to get some of that sweet Coke money, but apparently
that's KOCH, not COKE.
Right.
For our listeners.
They're not in bed with the CIA.
Right, exactly.
Well, they're endorsing Nikki Haley, so who knows at this point?
Yeah, good point.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that this is the sign that, unfortunately, this organization on a national level has fallen to the military-industrial complex, which is unfortunate. But within New Hampshire, the most based affiliate of AFP, there's been dissension amongst the ranks of people. There's a person that's been organizing there for a while, Chris, who on Twitter announced that he was basically not going to put any energy into this effort, because his principles come first, and he's putting his job on the line because he believed in Americans for Prosperity as like an organization that could espouse libertarian values, particularly in New Hampshire. But to see this happen, basically nobody that I know that works in the New Hampshire AFP office is appreciative of this decision.
How are they rationalizing the endorsement? What's their reason?
Basically, their main reason is they just want Trump to be defeated.
Okay.
The way that they're doing
Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, well,
that's on both sides.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, but I think the way that they view it is that Trump, they think, has a very low probability of being reelected, and so they want to support somebody that they feel like is going to have a higher probability of being elected, but is also, not a Democrat. So I guess
I don't know how you get to that conclusion. How do you decide that Trump has a low chance of winning?
Because he's going to be in jail in Georgia.
Yeah, that actually increases his chance of winning.
Not if he's in jail in Georgia.
No. Have you looked at this? Every single time that they're like, oh, we're bringing him up on these charges, his popularity goes up.
His popularity goes up, but if he's convicted in Georgia, he is no longer eligible.
That's not true, actually. No, you can be in jail and get elected president.
From jail. He's going to serve his term from jail in Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay.
The worst part about all of this, though, is that I would rather have Joe Biden win than Nikki Haley win.
Yeah.
Because she is terrible.
I know, right?
Yeah,
No, she
not
really is
surprised
that
coming from
bad.
you.
That just
Yeah.
made me queasy inside just hearing that.
Right?
Yeah, and so I don't take that lightly, because we've all seen how horrible Joe Biden's been. But I think that one of the main things that's inspiring her to run is to make it so that World War III becomes a reality. And for no other reason but to increase the profits of the military-industrial complex. So it's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Do we have a definition for World War III at this point? Can someone tell me what it will take for World War III to be like a term that's going on?
That's a good question.
Well, I would say
Russia's at war with Ukraine. China's at war with Taiwan.
Yep.
North Korea, South Korea, whatever.
Well, so China isn't at war with Taiwan yet.
The United States is at war with its own citizens.
Well, and
it seems like there's war all over the world, but no world war.
Well, and so that's the difference. Having wars, plural, between different countries, between Ukraine and Russia, between if China does go to war with Taiwan, but Taiwan is not defended by America, then that would not be a world war. That would be a war in the world. But if you have a single war where Russia and China are on one side and Europe and North America are on the other side, that would be World War III.
Okay. So America has to be a part of it.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so
because America versus Russia is still just a war, right? It's not a world war. It's just two countries.
If you have a situation where America and Russia were at war and China stayed out of it, then in theory,
it's your microphone. It's not.
Sorry, I'm trying to fix it. Go ahead.
Yeah, then in theory, you could have a major war that is not World War III.
Okay.
But once you have all of the superpowers involved.
Just going back to Americans for Prosperity for a second.
Way to redirect, Evan.
I just wanted to put an asterisk on this, which is that it's the national organization that sucks. I think that on a state level, AFP New Hampshire is still going to be a really big part in ensuring that we get some good Liberty candidates. Who
are they going to be endorsing?
Well, I did door knocking for them during the last cycle, and they all endorsed really great, fantastic people on a state level. There was this one state rep candidate that I got to door knock for, Keith Ammon, who is by far the most friendly person to crypto, in the whole state house.
Yeah.
And I door knocked 300 or 400 doors for him, and he won by less than 10 votes. So AFP basically paid me to ensure that he won. So it's still a very important organization.
Hey, Zephan, thank you so much for the call, man. We appreciate you.
Yeah, a tip of the hat to Chris for putting his livelihood on the line to do what's right.
Indeed. 603-283-6160. Are you willing to put your career, your livelihood on the line for what you believe in? Give us a call. More Free Talk Live is coming up.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone with The Week in Review. Israel has resumed its military operation in Gaza, accusing Hamas of violating a ceasefire after nearly a week of a pause in fighting. That truce had been due to expire after the release of dozens of hostages held by Hamas and prisoners from Israeli jails. As correspondent Sarah Coates reports from Tel Aviv, the resumption of hostilities will worsen the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Aid agencies say that conditions inside the Gaza Strip are deteriorating by the minute. They say they are catastrophic. And look, with this resumption of fighting, one can believe that they will only get worse, especially due to the overcrowding down in the south, with the military telling people to move there for their own safety.
India says a panel will investigate US prosecutors' allegations that an Indian government official was involved in a plot to assassinate a Sikh activist on US soil. Ishan Garg tells us more about the investigation from New Delhi.
Well, Indian government officials have said that they are constituting a panel to investigate this subject. They haven't given out the details of who is going to be present on the panel. And analysts say that it's not likely that the details of this investigation are going to come out into the public forum. They say Indian government now saying that this is against government policy. And they're also saying the fact that this goes against India's own national security interest is among the major reasons why they are going to investigate this case thoroughly.
A US lawmaker was dramatically expelled from Congress on Friday after his colleagues voted overwhelmingly to throw him out of the House of Representatives. The Republican Party's now former Congressman, George Santos, becomes the sixth person ever to be dismissed from the lower chamber, and the first one since the Civil War to be removed without having been criminally convicted. He's accused by an ethics report of exploiting his position for personal financial profit, allegedly stealing money from his own campaign to spend on Botox treatments, luxury fashion brands, trips to Las Vegas, and even purchases from the adult content site OnlyFans. Benji Hire has been following the saga that's gripped Washington for months.
A remarkable, often mystifying, short stint in Congress for the New York representative. A self-confessed terrible liar who's in the past admitted to fabricating details about his upbringing and education, George Santos has already been indicted for conspiracy, corruption, false statements, identity theft and credit card fraud. He pleaded not guilty weeks ago to the array of charges. In spite of mounting political and judicial pressure, he'd remained defiant, consistently refusing to resign, condemning multiple attempts to oust him from office as bullying, and branding the investigation into him as a disgusting smear. A vacancy in Santos's seat now gives Democrats the chance to flip it in their favor.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
How testy are you?
This testy. That testy. Testy 1, 2, 3.
Three testes.
3 levels of testy.
Is that like the girl from both what do you call it, movies, Total Recall, where they had the three-breasted woman? It's one of my favorite science fiction things ever. And like in both movies, it's just a short. They just sort of breeze over it, right? It's like, oh, there it is, and they don't show it again. But it's amazing every time I see it.
I'm glad they did the recall in the second movie of that, because that was one of the most memorable things of the first one.
In Total Recall, the remake, they recalled the thing from the first Total Recall, which, what should they have called it? Total Recall Squared or something, right? Like,
no, it's just a reboot.
Yeah,
absolute recall.
Recall again.
Wasn't even the same guy.
Continuous recall. It is Free Talk Live, in case those of you listening are wondering, who these guys are and what we're doing. If you don't know of us, we're at freetalklive.com. You can find out all about the show. In the studio tonight, it's myself, the Reverend Captain Kickass, joining me.
Pickles Mountaineer.
And Richie Rich.
The telephone number, if you would like to call, and there's several callers on hold, so if you aren't getting through, please keep trying. The phone number, 603-283-6160, if you'd like to join us. Before we go on, this hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash master nodes. These master nodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the treasury. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies that is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and it's in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and easy to use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. And again, big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us here at Free Talk Live $32 per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn more about Dash. That's dash.org. All right. We were talking about, what were we talking about? Healthcare. We were talking about Biden telling companies
inflation
to lower their prices and stop gouging. How about government lower their price and stop gouging people? Huh? How about that, Mr. Biden, and all the rest of you government nincompoops?
Or
only for the corporations.
Or let's be real about this. The actual price of government is what they print. So how about you stop spending way more than you take in taxes so that you print less?
They've never heard of a
the government to
budget.
shut down Peakless?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking them to do?
Of course I do.
Stay within their budget? Never gonna happen.
All right, we got
I
more.
mean, that's true. But I mean, that would be the not hypocritical thing to do.
You want old people to die because they're not getting Social Security.
Well, if you count Biden as people, maybe.
We'll talk more about that, and we've got more in store. But first, let's go to some of your calls and thoughts. Let's go to Gigi in South Carolina. Gigi, you're on Free Talk Live.
Good evening, everybody. Richie, good to hear you back.
I haven't gone anywhere. I've been on more than I used to be.
For a few times that I called in, you weren't one of the guest hosts, so
You
welcome
might be
back.
calling in on Sundays again because I moved my
sir.
days. Yeah.
Yeah, we moved Richie
Yes.
from Sunday back to over to Saturday.
Someone strong enough to take Ian's seat on Saturday nights. Had
Good
to
to
occupy
hear you
the
back
chair.
on the panel. I enjoy your contributions and your humor. Number one, I sent my weekly letter to Ian. Every week I send Ian a letter because I value this program.
And for those of you
Yes.
listening, we'll post a link on our social media with the directions and address how you can write Ian. We'll also post a link
sir.
for how to
Number
write
two,
Aria.
regarding the removal as United States Congressman from Nassau County, New York, Long Island, Mr. Santos, I have a question for everybody out there listening, as well as for all three of the hosts this evening. Understanding what the allegations against him continue to be, as well as the many, many charges levied against him in federal court, I am still asking from a constitutional perspective, and you know how crazy I am about civil liberties, everybody. Was this, in fact, a denial of Mr. Santos's due process? A wonderful argument, in my personal opinion, could be made in that regard. That's just my opinion. And lastly,
I'll
Captain,
say no.
you...
Then. But go
Pardon?
ahead. I'll say no, but go ahead and finish your next point.
Okay. Separate from the rules of Congress, was it a violation of his due process accorded to every resident and citizen and non-resident in the United States? Because the Constitution does not specify due process is only given to U.S. citizens. So that's my argument, playing devil's advocate. And lastly, prior to this commercial just done, the captain asked anybody out there listening, have you ever risked your profession or career for something you truly believed in? Yes, personally, I did when I was a full-time professor at a public institution in Miami, Florida. I had a former mayor of the county of Miami-Dade come and lecture as a guest to my political science class. During the course of his presentation, he stated something as a declarative statement to which I vehemently opposed. I raised my hand. I stood up, ladylike and composed, and I gave my response. About 10 days later, in my office, my chairperson at the time asked me to send a letter to the mayor apologizing for my statement in response to his statement, and I refused. She brought me up on charges at a faculty meeting and wanted me terminated. I stood my ground, and I, at the time, was publishing on the appellate level in Florida, and my father was still a licensed practicing criminal court judge. And I called and I said, "Daddy, help me, I'm drowning." And we stood our ground and argued in the faculty meeting, and I prevailed. I didn't let her screw me over, even at the threat of being terminated professionally and losing my salary. So, Captain, I've done it.
Let me tie your 2 points together then. Had you been terminated, would you have considered that a violation of your due process rights?
Yes, sir, because we cited it. Oh, Richie, I like when you're there. We cited it in my presentation, both orally and typed and submitted. Yes, we cited the importance of freedom of academic speech on a university/college environment. We also cited due process of an open format that the college advocates in their statement and in their mission statement in particular, whether it's faculty or students, and the importance of equal protection. Amendments 5, 14 were both cited when I argued my position. You bet I did.
So employers need to justify somehow with regards to termination. They can't just fire anybody for anything.
In that case, they did.
Well, in general.
Well, I cannot speak in general. I only can go on what I personally experienced in response to the captain's question.
Were you working for the government at that point?
No, I was not. I was a full-time professor.
Then how could this possibly have been a if you due process does not apply to employers?
Because I had not yet been tenured.
Yeah, and no, I think that they had absolutely every right to fire you for any reason or no reason, because that's how freedom of association works. Okay, well, when did their right to fire you stop?
I beg your pardon?
When did their right to stop associating with you end?
The chairperson claimed that my comment to the former mayor was wrong and inappropriate and caused, and I'm quoting now, controversy. That's what she stated in writing and verbally.
And as an employer, that should be enough. That's more than enough to disassociate from any employee.
However, when a university and or college publishes in their mission statement, we uphold academic freedom of speech, it has to be protected.
Does that change anything, people?
So you held them accountable to their own mission statement?
I certainly did, yes, sir, including citing due process and equal protection. And the faculty committee voted in my favor. I was flabbergasted, but relieved.
Oh, I love that word. Flabbergasted is one of my favorite words ever.
Yeah, no, that absolutely does change it. So,
people. Okay. You know that.
Yeah, no, I'd say that,
and so does everybody listening.
Yeah, if it's in your contract or if it's in the foundation of whatever company, that here's how we operate, and then they stop operating that way, then they are defrauding you.
Okay.
So if you expect them to allow and even encourage free speech, and you act on that assumption, and then they punish you for speaking freely, that's them breaking their agreement.
Okay.
Well,
do they still have to associate
for
with
me,
you then?
One of my students
if that is the reason for
it was also recorded verbally, and we presented it at the faculty hearing, the second hearing. The faculty on the committee, including 3 of the deans, part of the administration, they all upheld my argument. And I, as I said, I was flabbergasted yet relieved.
So now let's take it to the George Santos thing. Expelled from Congress. Is Congress in violation because of something that he did? Or can they disassociate with him as well?
Well, I'm saying he has not yet been convicted.
I don't think it matters.
Any of the. Let me finish, please. There has been no conviction of any of the 23 allegations levied upon him at this juncture. So,
are you done?
Without
because I still don't think it matters.
Can he simply be dismissed without being found guilty?
Yes, because an employer, depending on the employment contract per Peakless, right? In general, an employer doesn't have to wait for you to get convicted of anything before just firing you.
I'm asking a question for general devil's argument's sake. That's all. I was thinking about it, and I spoke with.
I'm on Gigi's side on this. I think that is. I think that's.
And many of them agreed with you, Richie. However, some agreed with me.
Okay.
No, I'm with Gigi on this one. So, as I understand it, and I could be mistaken here, but as I understand it, there's a very specific process for ousting someone from political position in the United States federal government, and that's where you charge them, and then as a result of indicting them, you bring them to trial, and then if they're guilty, then you can remove them from office.
That's why I'm asking this.
Right. Now, there's nothing in the Constitution about there being a vote in Congress to kick someone else out of Congress.
Well, then he ought just show back up tomorrow and go back to work.
Honestly, yeah.
Well, that's why I asked. Whatever we may think of him privately or morally has nothing to do with due process.
Right. I mean, Congress can get together and have a vote as to what pizza topping you ought to have on your pizza tomorrow for lunch. That doesn't mean anything at all to anybody.
Right.
But they can do it. Sure. In the same way, sure, you can get Congress together and have them vote on he shouldn't be here. But that doesn't mean anything to anybody. There's nothing in their powers, as they've agreed on them, that gives them this ability.
Well, then how are they doing it then? Under what guise or what excuse? What reason are they doing it?
Because we no longer follow any kind of structure.
Legally.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, no, there's nothing legal about this. He's being illegally ousted from power.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Gigi, thank you so much for the call. We appreciate you. 603-283-6160.
And
I'm not up to speed on this because I rarely pay attention to politicians in the news and whatever kind of gyrations they're going. But apparently they asked him to resign several times, and now there's 13 charges the DOJ has levied against him.
Right, but that's irrelevant under standard employee-employee relationships.
Well, it depends on what you mean by that because it varies from state to state. There are federal requirements as well.
Let's say morally then and ethically.
Most states have what's called at-will employment, which means you can be let go for any reason or no reason at all.
Allegedly.
And you also, allegedly, can just quit for no reason.
Right.
You can do just a no call, no show. I'm done,
Right.
Kind of a thing. Now, I don't know how that pertains to somebody employed by Congress or the Senate.
Well, that's why they have policies and procedures. And if they went through some sort of policy, procedure, whatever, to take a vote to oust him, right, and that's in their bylaws somewhere that we're not aware of.
Which I don't think it is.
Okay. I don't know either.
Like, it might be, but I'm pretty sure it's not.
Right. But my suggestion is you can go through that process regardless of whether or not he's been indicted on any charge or no charges at all. If they just want him out and there is a process in place It matters not if he's charged with 1 federal felony, 28 federal felonies, or 0 federal felonies. The due process question is irrelevant to whether or not ousting him is above board or not.
Well, so the reason that this is different, though, like due process, it means a sort of different thing when you are government as compared to when you are an employee. So, like, as an employee, I have no right to go to trial in order to get fired or not get fired.
Well, but yes, you have no right to go to trial on whether or not you get fired. But if you get arrested for shoplifting and your employer goes like, we don't want him here, and they fire you, and then you go ahead and you beat the shoplifting charge and found not guilty, you don't automatically get your job back. They weren't in violation of some employment contract.
That's true.
By firing you for the arrest.
That's true.
Right? It's a separate issue. They can fire you for being arrested. They can fire you for not being arrested. They can fire you for whatever reason they want. Right, and irregardless of what you're facing in legal land, And so if Congress has irregardless, it's both a word and not a word.
It's eerie.
This is how we get clear communication here.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I just like saying it because I saw it on Mind of Mencia once, and it's just irregardless.
Okay, so they're not an employer. That's not what's going on here.
Got it. But if there's like what we don't know is whether or not there's a procedure in place to oust him.
And I'm pretty sure there's not.
You're pretty sure there's not, but we don't know.
I think the procedure...
let's examine this from both possibilities then.
Hold on. I think the procedure is exactly what happened, right? They took a vote. He was expelled from the House in a bipartisan vote on Friday.
Yeah, that's not in there.
Dozens of his Republican colleagues joining Democrats and ousting him from Congress.
That's not in the Constitution.
Are they allowed to do that?
Neither is the Patriot Act. I mean, has that ever stopped these bastards from doing whatever
their
the hell they want?
Their ability to pass the Patriot Act is in the Constitution.
Let's not dive into that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. They took a vote to oust him.
Yeah.
Is that legal or not legal, regardless of his legal problems with his 28 federal felonies?
Well, I think
it's super illegal.
So
number one,
you're
the selection.
That, but
No. This part I actually know.
Okay.
So this part of the Constitution was a big kerfluffle because it's been being violated for a good long time.
Okay.
So it originally, the selection of these representatives was exclusively and explicitly left up to the states.
Okay.
And then Congress illegally passed a law, well, specifically an amendment, changing the way that these representatives were selected.
Okay.
Now, that was itself illegal, and it continues to be done illegally.
Okay.
Now, this is that squared. So on top of the fact that your representatives are selected at a federal level instead of a state level, which is illegal, they are now not only selected federally, they are ousted federally, which not only is there no process for, they have no, at least according to their documents, they have no authority to do that.
Let me throw this back at you.
Dude should totally go to work tomorrow.
Let me throw this back at you. If he was installed illegally, then he ought not be there to begin with.
But all the people that are voting on him were also installed illegally.
Then none of them should be there, and he ought not go to work tomorrow.
Finally, none of them should be there. They all ought not go to work tomorrow. All of them.
That's true.
Senators, whatever part of government you work for, just don't go in because you've been installed illegally.
Yeah.
If you won a fraudulent election, you were not the president.
Fair.
I just want to
Well, and the wild thing is that they've managed to convince people, A, that all of this could be legitimate ever, and B, that this particular way of doing this is legitimate. The Confederate States of America were never dissolved, so there is no legitimacy to the United States of America.
I want to tell you, just
even under their insane rules.
Just by skimming this article now, I have discovered why the rest of the Congress critters are doing this, right? And it's so, once I read this to you, you're going to be like, well, of course, right? It's because they're jealous that they didn't think of this stuff first, right?
Go on.
The charges stemmed from fraudulent schemes and brazen misrepresentations that were meant to enrich Santos as he ran for Congress, said the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York.
Okay.
So,
they're all doing it then.
No, they are. But like he did it in a way that enriched him, not once he got to Congress, but on his way into getting it. And they were like, why didn't we think of that?
No, they're all doing it. There's all misappropriation of campaign funds all over the place.
Okay, but he did it in such a way that they're just like, oh, he can't do that. We didn't get to do that. Like, it's just, why didn't we get to? It's like, when the ice cream truck comes rolling down the street and all your friends, go to their moms. Hey, Mom, can I have $1 or whatever to go get my ice cream? And your mom's like, no, you're not getting $1. So then everybody who didn't get $1 is now voting this guy out.
Yeah. Still irrelevant to whether or not, and I'll take Peakless at his word that they're not allowed to do it. Right? It's still a separate. It's still a separate issue.
There's that word.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. It's going to happen.
Okay.
I mean, they're not allowed to. This is completely bizarre, but it's still going to happen.
Okay. Well, then he should take his due process for this to court and challenge them for illegally ousting him or whatever.
Nothing warms my heart more.
Oh, dude, he should sue them for all of the money that he was going to make being a corrupt politician. There you go.
Millions.
That's the ticket.
Millions upon millions.
Nothing warms my heart more than politicians fighting other politicians,
right?
Government agencies fighting other government agencies. If the whole damn system could just sort of eat itself, I would be one of the happiest dudes on planet Earth. Period. And I hope it continues. I hope these guys do nothing but bicker and squabble with each other. I hope they don't work together at all to accomplish their evil, right? I hope they all get into arguments and fist fights and legal discourse and all that with each other because it's way better for the people.
Duels on the Capitol lawn.
Something. That would be preferable to war.
Okay.
Right? If politicians would just have a duel, right? If I don't know, like Putin and Biden, somebody slapped the other one with a glove, right? It's time for a duel, right? And then you televise that.
Thomas Massey comes out with a sling.
Make it a pay-per-view event or something, right? That benefits some charities of some kind.
I was going to say, I'm not going to pay for a paper. I'm going to torrent it after the fact.
Well, I mean, I'm going to torrent it live. That's what I'm going to do, or otherwise figure a way to view it live without paying for it. But
Buffalo Wild Wings presents.
Because those things exist. There are ways to do that.
Yeah, I find live torrent streams to be clunky at best.
There's not necessarily torrent streams. They're just live streams, but you can't access them in the U.S.
Okay.
So you have to do a thing in order to get them.
I tried that with one of the Conor McGregor fights and ended up switching channels like 20 times before giving up.
Yeah, it was something it's all about preference. 603-283-6160 is the number here if you'd like to join us tonight. Still to come, we're going to talk about libertarianism. Is it dangerous?
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone with The Week in Review. Israel has resumed its military operation in Gaza, accusing Hamas of violating a ceasefire after nearly a week of a pause in fighting. That truce had been due to expire after the release of dozens of hostages held by Hamas and prisoners from Israeli jails. As correspondent Sarah Coates reports from Tel Aviv, the resumption of hostilities will worsen the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Aid agencies say that conditions inside the Gaza Strip are deteriorating by the minute. They say they are catastrophic. And look, with this resumption of fighting, one can believe that they will only get worse, especially due to the overcrowding down in the south, with the military telling people to move there for their own safety.
India says a panel will investigate US prosecutors' allegations that an Indian government official was involved in a plot to assassinate a Sikh activist on US soil. Ishan Garg tells us more about the investigation from New Delhi.
Well, Indian government officials have said that they are constituting a panel to investigate this subject. They haven't given out the details of who is going to be present on the panel. And analysts say that it's not likely that the details of this investigation are going to come out into the public forum. They say Indian government now saying that this is against government policy. And they're also saying the fact that this goes against India's own national security interest is among the major reasons why they are going to investigate this case thoroughly.
A US lawmaker was dramatically expelled from Congress on Friday after his colleagues voted overwhelmingly to throw him out of the House of Representatives. The Republican Party's now former Congressman, George Santos, becomes the 6th person ever to be dismissed from the lower chamber, and the first one since the Civil War to be removed without having been criminally convicted. He's accused by an ethics report of exploiting his position for personal financial profit, allegedly stealing money from his own campaign to spend on Botox treatments, luxury fashion brands, trips to Las Vegas, and even purchases from the adult content site OnlyFans. Benji High has been following the saga that's gripped Washington for months.
A remarkable, often mystifying, short stint in Congress for the New York representative. A self-confessed terrible liar who's in the past admitted to fabricating details about his upbringing and education, George Santos had already been indicted for conspiracy, corruption, false statements, identity theft and credit card fraud. He pleaded not guilty weeks ago to the array of charges. He'd remained defiant, consistently refusing to resign, condemning multiple attempts to oust him from office as bullying, and branding the investigation into him as a disgusting smear. A vacancy in Santos's seat now gives Democrats the chance to flip it. Benji High, Washington.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. Russia's Supreme Court has upheld a ban on the international LGBTQ movement, which Moscow calls an extremist organisation. There is no such legal entity or movement in Russia, but human rights activists warn the ban could lead to an increase in harassment and persecution against LGBTQ people in Russia. Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
Russia's Supreme Court has granted the Justice Ministry's request to ban the so-called international LGBT movement. The hearing took place without a defendant because there's no such organization or entity in Russia. Pro-LGBTQ activists warn the absurdity of the case shouldn't overshadow the danger it poses. Daria Bondarchuk, Moscow.
And the former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died at the age of 100. He was one of the most controversial figures in US foreign policy, serving under Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks reports.
Henry Kissinger was born in 1923 in Germany and moved to the United States when he was 15, his parents seeking to escape the Nazis. He became the most influential figure in American foreign policy for generations, the only man simultaneously to serve as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. He was Richard Nixon's right-hand man, winning the Nobel Peace Prize for secret negotiations that ended the Vietnam War. But critics accused him of war crimes over brutal American conduct in Cambodia and of moral bankruptcy in countries as diverse as Iran, Pakistan, Cyprus and Chile. Kissinger worked until his final days, recently opining on the crisis in Gaza, meeting President Xi Jinping in China just 4 months ago. His celebrity status saw a huge 100th birthday party in New York earlier this year. Both admired and reviled, he will be remembered as one of the most controversial figures in modern American history.
I'm Caroline Malone in Washington, and that was The Week.
An unpopular police officer thinks about committing a racially motivated offense for a little support. A middle-aged man is having the best snacks of his life, and a housefly drops everything to go stand on a watermelon slice. This is the Onion Week in Review. Noting the youth center's ping pong table and array of DVDs and Blu-rays, local youth minister Mark Kindler told reporters this week that his church's new rec room has everything a teen could want. The youth pastor revealed that the basement facility's many teen-friendly amenities include a new Wii U console, an iPod dock for the teens to play any music they like, and some comfortable recliners for those who just want to relax or do their homework after school.
We've really gone out of our way to give the rec room a laid-back atmosphere. It's stocked with snacks, but sometimes at the end of the week, we'll spring for some pizza. Honestly, I wish I had a place like this when I was their age.
In other news, increased violence leads the State Department to issue an advisory for Americans traveling to 1861, and an elderly lobbyist is always droning on about how little legislation used to cost in his day.
This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in and listening to Free Talk Live. We're a live radio call-in program where you can take control of the airwaves, talk about whatever is on your mind. The telephone number, should you wish to call, is 603-283-6160. Again, 603-283-6160. In the studio, it's
Peakless Mountaineer,
Richie Rich.
And I am your host tonight, the Reverend Captain Kickass. Before we go on, I want to say thank you to tonight's amplifier. What is an amplifier, you might ask? Well, an amplifier is somebody who has visited amps.freetalklive.com and decided they like this show enough to give us some money for the purposes of advertising, marketing, promoting, and supporting. What does that really mean? Like, layman's terms, Captain. It means they like the hosts, the co-hosts, the callers, the topics, the perspective of freedom, peace, liberty, prosperity that we bring. They like it enough that they want to help spread the message of freedom. And they think it's a good use of their Liberty dollar to help us get on more radio stations. We're currently on around 180 radio stations. We could be on 200, 250, 300, 350. Not out of the question. It's all up to you. This week's amplifier is somebody named Monero FTW.
Nice.
So thank you, Monero FTW, for your contribution to this program, helping us advertise, market, promote, and support. If you want to find out more, visit amps.freetalklive.com. And thanks again, Monero FTW. We appreciate you. All right. So we have been talking about, well, all sorts of things. We were most recently talking about a bunch of a-holes in government.
Isn't that what we always talk about?
I mean...
Thematically?
We were, more specifically, this is the niche, right? We're talking about government a-holes sort of persecuting another government a-hole. And, I don't pay attention to that because, the whole system is, a thing that should go away. And so whatever happens within the system, if there's infighting, I applaud that, but I'm certainly not going to waste my valuable time reading about it.
I want to see more of it. Oh, there goes the coffee.
Yeah, I didn't know that this had gone on until Gigi called in with it. But I will say that I did look into how you are supposed to remove people from office, and that ain't it.
Okay.
That's what impeachment is for, is you get impeached, then you have a trial, then you get removed from office.
Does removing people from office involve the use of like heavy equipment, like a crane or something like that, for example?
Or a guillotine, perhaps.
Perhaps a modified bulldozer.
Something.
I'm just thinking out loud here. I don't really know the answer to these questions, but because I don't pay attention to like infighting in government, right? I don't care. Like, you guys are literally oppressing everyone through taxation, through the threat and use of coercion and violence. Like, if you're bickering amongst yourselves and you're fighting amongst yourselves, like the only thing I'd like to do is throw some fuel on that fire.
Yes. Which is why, like, the impeachment of Trump, for all it's worth, I'm very hopeful that it sparks a bunch of retaliation.
Okay.
Right. Just back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you impeached our guy, then we're going to impeach your guy.
Right.
Right. And then they just tie themselves up fighting with each other and hopefully not passing any new laws.
Yeah. Let's go to some of your calls and thoughts. We've got Rob in Vermont calling. Rob, you're on Free Talk Live.
I got to agree with Richie. I would really like to see, more knockdown, drag-out fights between the two parties. Like there was one that came close. What was it? A couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago, Bernie Sanders was overseeing the hearing, and guy that represented the was a Teamsters union, I think. He challenged the senator to stand his butt up.
Well, no, it was the other way around. It was the senator that challenged the Teamster.
To do what?
Oh, okay,
challenge him to a fight.
Nice.
Because the senator was like an independent plumber or something like in his past life, and the Teamster was protecting the unions. He's like, we could do this like men, and we can just step outside. And the Teamster guy's like, whenever you want to. The guy goes, okay, let's just do it now. And then starts to get up and walk outside, and Teamster guy's like, nope, sit down. And then his boss, tell him to sit down, and you're not going to go out and fight.
Well, I guess we know who won that.
Yeah, the senator.
Yeah.
The senator did. Right. He was getting ready to take off his wedding band. I think that we need to see more of this because these people, they cause harm to all of us.
Right. I think we need to reclaim our heritage because back in the day, Congress would fist fight each other. Like, they'd go to Congress to vote with, like...
What?
Yeah, they would go to work with canes, with heavy balls on the top, because they might need to bash some skulls in.
He said heavy
balls.
This
is actually a thing that we used to do in this country, and I think we should do more of it, because then they're fighting each other, and not all of us.
Yeah, I want, if politicians have to exist, particularly... when they have an inter-country conflict, right? They should not conscript the young, right? Give them guns and tell them to go fight people they've never met, whom they have no quarrel with, etc., and so on. No, instead, they should have the balls to get in the ring with one of these other supposed leaders of these
I'm glad you
countries.
guys are finally coming on my side. Because fundamentally, this is a man thing, right? You're challenged to a fight.
Yep.
A fist fight.
Yep.
Right? Like, do you accept or not?
I'll meet you at the football field at 3:45 after school,
If you say yes, you gotta go.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta go and either, win or lose.
Otherwise,
you gotta fight.
You lose.
You lose.
If you don't show up to the fight, then you lost that fight.
Right, yeah.
And if that fight was an extension of an argument, then you lost that argument.
Yeah.
Like, whatever your position was, you are now wrong.
If these politicians were really leaders, which they're not, by the way, if you know the definition of leader, if they were really leaders, though, they would be the first ones to pick up a gun and go and join whatever war du jour they happen to be sponsoring.
Azov Battalion.
Because
they're already Nazis.
I think that there's one person out there, I believe, that could straighten this all out, and that's Vernon Supreme.
Okay. Not where I thought you were going with this, but all right.
Hey, look, not only do the people in the United States need Vernon Supreme, they deserve him.
That's true.
Well,
that's true. We deserve Vermin Supreme.
Vermin Supreme is a very good clown, but he's also a socialist clown, and we ought to keep that in mind.
I don't know what I would do with my pony.
Sell it.
Like
pony meat.
Oh, I'd have to pony up for that.
Yeah,
the first pony barbecue.
Yeah, you can't sell a pony in that economy.
You'd have
Why
to
not?
wait.
Well,
until
because the price of ponies has gone through the floor as soon as they were provided by the state.
Yeah.
Well, but someone wants 2 ponies.
Or you wait.
I mean, it's better than eating it.
You wait until it becomes
I know
a horse.
people who buy food stamps. There's a market.
Yeah. Rob, anything else?
Yeah, I just want to end with something a little different, and that is that, there's been this problem with homelessness, across the United States. It's really kind of sad. But, I thought about it today, and I said, if they took that youth detention center that's over in Manchester and got the kids out of there, why not let the homeless people live there? Just a thought, that's all.
It's a terrible thought.
Rob, thanks for the call, man. We appreciate you.
What's wrong with that plan?
What's wrong? Because that's on a similar level. That's what they're trying to do in like California with vacant hotel rooms. Well, you've got the room available. You're not filling up for the night. Let's just put homeless people in there.
Yeah.
And it's a violation of the hotel owner's property
But we're
rights.
talking about a government facility.
Okay.
I am all for putting the homeless in a government facility instead of it doing what it was doing.
Well, then just put them in jail. Yeah. 3 hots and a bed.
No, like voluntarily. Like, make it available if they want to go there. Not forcing them into that building. But hey, since we've decided to stop being horrible to children here, and we've got some extra space, here's a roof if you want it.
Why can't that also be jail? You don't have to lock the cell door.
Yeah.
I mean,
Just bring them food and give them a mattress.
We don't really have a homeless problem. We have a houseless problem. The problem is, of course, the balance between distribution is caused because there's an imbalance of distribution and an over-regulation when it comes to markets. So that is to say, there are enough vacant homes, apartments, etc., and so on. There are enough places, there are more than enough places for everyone in the United States to have their own place. But the distribution of said places sucks because of over-regulation, government interference, etc., and so on.
Well,
inflation, people can't afford crap anymore.
Well, and the biggest reason we have so many extra places is because the saving power of the dollar is non-existent.
Right.
So people, instead of saving in dollars, they save in stocks, they save in homes in this case. So there's way more houses built than there actually is demand to buy them.
Well, okay, so let's pause there then. What government regulation is keeping those prices inflated above the market level?
Printing money.
No, that's general inflation, right? If there's an over demand for houses, or oversupply, I should say, of houses, right? The market should adjust to make that excess property, right,
and
affordable for people who are demanding it.
And if we could save in dollars, that's exactly what would happen. But saving in dollars is a losing bet.
Well, yeah, you're talking about whether or not people demanding the houses can save up enough to afford it. What I'm suggesting is that if with an overabundance of supply, the price should regulate down towards the demand, and you would
all
not
things
need.
being equal.
Well,
but
that's
what's not
my
equal is that you don't have the ability to save. And since we don't have ordinary savings tools, which a decent dollar would be an ordinary savings tool.
Sure.
But since we don't have that, people find other ways to save, ways that don't devalue.
But there's
And in
still
this
an
case,
oversupply.
Well, okay, so to kind of assist you with your question, so to Peakless's point, do you remember we did a couple of times we've talked about it here on Free Talk Live, where like China is buying all this real estate and building all these like condos or whatever,
It was in the news
and going
again whether or not China
unoccupied,
can buy.
right?
Yeah, ghost
So
cities.
That's happening here, but at a more micro level, right?
Exactly.
Builders are buying plots of property, building a bunch of houses, townhomes, whatever it is, subdivisions.
Not being able to sell it, making no money on it.
Well, but they're sitting on it because the value of the real estate itself continues to increase.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter if it's purchased or not; they're still making money
How are you making money?
In number of dollars.
Because
if they put $300,000 into a piece of property and no one buys it, no one rents it, in 5 years from now, that thing is still going to be worth like a couple $100,000 more.
Well, okay.
So they've made, quote unquote,
they haven't made
dollars.
anything. You don't make anything until you sell it.
They've increased the number. Well, okay.
They've increased the value on paper.
But they can also now take out a loan against that.
Okay.
Right? So they have an asset that is worth something, even if it goes unoccupied. So then the other things that get in the way.
So is this a market incentive or is this a government incentive to continue to hold on to non-profitable assets?
But it is profitable.
It's not profitable until they sell it.
No, he just went over this. Even if they don't sell it,
the value goes up. I got it.
Right.
And you made no profit on that.
Well, no. And not only can they get the profit if they chose to sell it,
they would have to sell it.
But they can take out a loan against that property, which lets them A, hold on to the property,
Understood.
and B, get dollars.
Understood.
If there's a thing that can get you dollars.
When you take out a loan, you are in more debt. You have not made a profit.
When the price of acquisition is, and I'm just using $300,000 for a nice round number. That's fine. I don't care about the
examples.
The price of acquisition is $300,000. They take, that's all it costs them, and they build, 2 homes for that amount of money, whatever it is. And then in 2 years, that property is now worth $500,000.
They have still made no profit.
But then they take out a loan for $400,000.
They are now $900,000 in the hole.
Are they? Or have they just made $100,000?
No, because they sunk $300 into the property. Now they're negative $300
because they know that they can sell for $100,000 more than the loan they're taking out.
They cannot sell. That's the whole point. That's why there's an oversupply. If they can sell, they can take a profit. But if they're sitting on, if there's an abundance of unsold homes, of which we're going to place these homeless people, right? Then those homes are not an oversupply, right? They can't put homeless people in them because the homeless people can't afford them. So they spent $300,000 on the land. They put 2 houses on it, $400,000, right? And then they took out a loan for however much that got you to your 900 number. All of those is outflow of cash. Not one thing you have described is an inflow of cash.
It's not. No, you're right. It's not profit.
Then how are they making money?
You're correct.
Well, so let's look at your example of selling the house for $300,000.
Okay.
So
that was their acquisition cost was $300,000 to buy the property and buy the house.
Okay, so let's look at selling it for $300,000 or for $500,000. Okay. Now, in either case, how much of that is going to go to taxes?
I don't know. Make up a number.
A lot.
Matter. Okay.
A big old chunk of that is going to go to taxes. Now, what do I want out of this deal? I want the $2 or $3 or $4 or whatever $100,000 that I then get to spend on stuff.
Right, but you would have had that already.
That's what I want. I want purchasing power. Now, if I can use the loan that I get on this to both A, get the purchasing power, and B, not have to pay taxes, then it's even better than selling the property would have been for what I actually want. Depends.
Well, okay.
Well,
also fair then.
Well, and again,
but in general,
so if I borrow $500,000 using my what cost me $300,000.
Yeah.
Now, if I then turn around and I buy another $300,000 property,
you're still in the negative by another $300,000.
But I got to spend $200,000.
You didn't get to spend it. You have to pay it back.
No, sure, I can totally spend it.
But you have to pay it back.
Sure.
It's a loan.
Sure.
You have to earn it somewhere else.
Right.
And the hope is that
I just bought a new property that is now going to be worth another $500,000.
It's still paper money. You've made no money so far.
All money's paper. What matters is your ability to spend.
All money is not paper.
Okay.
Well, that's true. But all dollars are paper.
So on paper, on the accounting books, you were in the negative at like every step of the way of the whole example.
Yeah, but in actuality, I got to buy whatever I wanted that whole time.
Right, and again,
I got to buy my Ferrari. I got to eat out. I got to do all the things that I wanted to do that I could have also done by selling the house and paying the government.
And under normal circumstances, you would have to generate money somewhere else to pay that loan back.
Right, but this is how messed up the real estate market is. So I want to go back, though, to the things that I think are interfering with the real estate market, preventing not just inflation, but preventing people from being able to get into houses. Did I just snort there?
A little bit.
Was
weird.
it? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Good morning.
I'm trying to remember all of them. Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, FHA.
Okay.
There's a few other ones that I can't think of, but those are the big three, I think. What these things, what these acronyms do, is allow people who otherwise couldn't afford property to be able to get into property. And it encourages irresponsibility.
Okay.
Right? We saw this in 2008, the housing collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Right before that thing happened, oh my gosh, you could not get away from the commercials. They were on the radio, the television, the internet, everywhere about bad credit, no credit, horrible credit, don't make any money. We don't care. We'll give you a loan and get you in a house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's coming around again because, as noted earlier, people can't afford to get into a house.
Right.
Generally.
So it's this never-ending cycle of, the government overregulated. Now the government's going to step in and put out a program that you could qualify for. I hate that word, qualify, because you're not really qualified. You're getting hornswoggled is what you're doing. Right?
Well, the taxpayers are getting hornswoggled.
Oh, yeah.
The homeowner's getting a deal.
Well, the homeowner is getting a property with which they cannot afford.
Or not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're picking your pocket with one hand, handing half of it to you with the other.
Well, okay, if you want to talk about taxes, fine. But in general, like right now, I could afford a mortgage for a much nicer place than my rent.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, rent is higher than a mortgage. Generally speaking.
But I can't save up the down payment for a house on my own, right? But if I had zero down and had lower payments on the mortgage than I have on my rent, I would be ahead immediately.
Right.
And at some point, because I now can afford it, I have more disposable income. I can make all the payments on the house for 30 years or whatever the term is, as long as I keep my job, all things being equal.
That's no longer the case, and just in the last year or two, when the interest rates or whatever
were hiked faster than at any time in history.
So like right now, it used to be that an individual making $60,000 a year could qualify for a mortgage on something around the average price in the U.S.
Okay.
Right? So we're talking $250,000 property, for example. That has now gone up to like almost $100,000. So unless you're making $100,000 a year as an individual, you ain't even going to qualify for a mortgage.
Right.
Under standard banking laws. Right. But you have these government programs, no money down, very low interest, and all of a sudden people who couldn't qualify for a regular loan
but
are now offered this, and if they're in a similar situation as I am, can afford a house now.
As I understand it, no, you can't, because without the 20% down, your mortgage now exceeds rent.
Okay.
Right? Because you're putting no money down, it has to come out somewhere.
No, it comes in the value of the home that I buy. And it may not,
I understand that,
be like the nicest home on the block.
But you're not going to get the below rent mortgage rate without putting a substantial down payment. Right? You're going to get a mortgage that is either at or above what you're paying in rent because of the zero down.
Depends on the value of the home that I buy. And what I'm suggesting...
The price of the home.
Yes.
Not the value.
Yeah, the price depends on the price of the home that I buy.
Right.
I can buy a home, with a lower mortgage than my rent and be better off than like the one bedroom I'm in now.
No, right now you can't.
What are you talking about?
Well, so for one thing, right now, no one is leaving their homes because they'll have to refinance, and refinancing now is a sucker's bet.
Well, let's just say you make $60,000 a year and you can qualify for a mortgage with government help at zero down. The interest rate that you're going to have right now is going to put that mortgage at about what you're paying for rent anyway.
Which means I can still afford it because I don't miss rent.
603-283-6160. Have you been hosed on property because of government regulation? Give us a call. Let us know. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone with The Week in Review. Israel has resumed its military operation in Gaza, accusing Hamas of violating a ceasefire after nearly a week of a pause in fighting. That truce had been due to expire after the release of dozens of hostages held by Hamas and prisoners from Israeli jails. As correspondent Sarah Coates reports from Tel Aviv, the resumption of hostilities will worsen the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Aid agencies say that conditions inside the Gaza Strip are deteriorating by the minute. They say they are catastrophic. And look, with this resumption of fighting, one can believe that they will only get worse, especially due to the overcrowding down in the south, with the military telling people to move there for their own safety.
India says a panel will investigate US prosecutors' allegations that an Indian government official was involved in a plot to assassinate a Sikh activist on US soil. Ishan Garg tells us more about the investigation from New Delhi.
Well, Indian government officials have said that they are constituting a panel to investigate this subject. They haven't given out the details of who is going to be present on the panel. And analysts say that it's not likely that the details of this investigation are going to come out into the public forum. They say Indian government now saying that this is against government policy. And they're also saying the fact that this goes against India's own national security interest is among the major reasons why they are going to investigate this case thoroughly.
A US lawmaker was dramatically expelled from Congress on Friday after his colleagues voted overwhelmingly to throw him out of the House of Representatives. The Republican Party's now former Congressman, George Santos, becomes the sixth person ever to be dismissed from the lower chamber, and the first one since the Civil War to be removed without having been criminally convicted. He's accused by an ethics report of exploiting his position for personal financial profit, allegedly stealing money from his own campaign to spend on Botox treatments, luxury fashion brands, trips to Las Vegas, and even purchases from the adult content site OnlyFans. Benji High has been following the saga that's gripped Washington for months.
A remarkable, often mystifying, short stint in Congress for the New York representative. A self-confessed terrible liar who's in the past admitted to fabricating details about his upbringing and education, George Santos has already been indicted for conspiracy, corruption, false statements, identity theft and credit card fraud. He pleaded not guilty weeks ago to the array of charges. In spite of mounting political and judicial pressure, he'd remained defiant, consistently refusing to resign, condemning multiple attempts to oust him from office as bullying, and branding the investigation into him as a disgusting smear. A vacancy in Santos's seat now gives Democrats the chance to flip it in their favor.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Yes, welcome back. Thank you for listening and tuning in to Free Talk Live. The telephone number is 603-283-6160. Again, 603-283-6160. In the studio, it's myself, the captain.
Peakless Mountaineer.
And Richie Rich.
We still have to talk about libertarianism. Is it a dangerous and ineffective political philosophy?
Dun, dun, dun.
And it seems almost, I don't know what the right word is, but let's just go to it anyway. It's Skeeter calling from his mom's basement somewhere in California.
Oh, the right would have been it's your boy.
Not only is it a dangerous idea, it's the most dangerous idea.
What's dangerous about it?
More so than communism and democracy themselves.
Wow.
Well, but you repeat yourself.
The danger is that it's inefficient, and the fact that
more inefficient than communism.
That's really funny.
It's comedy hour, Skeeter.
Let me tell you why. I mean, communism is inefficient.
Sure, communism murders people across the globe, but this will be inefficient.
Because the inefficiency is much less intense with libertarianism, but it lasts a much longer time. So, and
that's because communism, everybody starves in the first few years.
There is that
damage. So the total damage is pretty much the same. If you have an intensity of inefficiency that's twice as the other, but the lesser lasts twice as long, you suffer the same amount of damage. But what's more dangerous is that it delays your recovery process.
I feel like he's describing statism.
It's dangerous. No, the inefficiency is the non-aggression principle. The market uses aggression as a tool. It only cares about evolutionary profit.
You could be forcing people to give you money instead of trading voluntarily.
And here's the thing. Here's another thing why I hate libertarianism. You guys keep saying this mantra that you keep saying this mantra that taxation is theft, and it's not.
It's extortion, technically.
It's not. It's not even extortion.
Yes, it is.
It's the price you pay for civilized society, Captain.
No, it isn't.
No.
Extortion is the price you pay for civilized society.
It's completely voluntary.
No, it isn't.
You guys can leave. This is collective property. It was fought for and defended and developed by the citizen collective of the United States.
I did not fight for or develop it.
If you don't like it, you can renounce citizenship and leave.
Not without paying.
I already debunked.
Yeah, I can't afford paying. Yeah, I can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
It costs too much to renounce your citizenship.
Yeah, you can.
No, you can't. Plus, why should I have to leave? They're the ones who suck.
Well, you don't like the rules that's set forth by this collective that developed this land and protected.
I never consented to any of them.
It does not protect me. It endangers my existence.
So
it is presently poking a fight with a nuclear power. It is endangering my presence. That's not protecting me. It's the opposite.
Just leave then.
If you're so scared of the government and nuclear war, why don't you leave? Why don't you leave? You can.
Because the only thing worse than American domestic policy is American forest policy.
I'll tell you why. Skeeter, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I will tell you why I don't leave. Because the lottery of birth should not violate consent.
It's not a lottery.
It is a lottery. Where I am born is just chance,
not
right?
A lottery.
It's total chance. If I'm born here in the United States and somebody else is born in Iraq or Africa or China, right? It's a complete happenstance. I get no choice. I got no choice. Now, the reason that I won't leave, Skeeter, I'm going to put you on hold. The reason I don't leave is because there is nowhere on planet Earth that is not claimed by a government. There is nowhere for me to go.
And I'll repeat what I said, just in case it went over. Oh, no, I won't.
There's nothing in anarcho-capitalism that says you have a right to land. Is there?
What does that have to do with
There
anything?
is something in anarcho-capitalism that says I have a right to security in my own body. Like, no one is allowed to assault me or blow me up or put me in jail when I haven't harmed anybody.
If there was a place, Skeeter, I've had enough.
All right.
Skeeter, if there was a place on planet Earth where there was no government, I can tell you, and I could live, I can tell you I would be there. But every grain of property is claimed by a government on planet Earth currently. Who did they buy it from, and why did they have the right to it?
So two things. I'll repeat what I said earlier because he was, talking over.
I hung up on him.
Right. I wanted you to mute him again so I could get it out.
Yeah.
The reason you don't leave America is because the only thing worse than American domestic policy is American foreign policy.
It's true.
Like you
That's
are
a
in
fact.
danger here.
It's a scientific fact.
You are much more danger there, wherever there happens to be, depending on the whims of politicians. And I will bring I don't know if I put this in the show prep or where if I came across it. There was a dude, and I forget where, might have been South America, whatever.
Yeah.
And he was living in a cave for 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then the government found out. And they said, sir, you have not paid your taxes for 26 years. You need to get out of that cave.
Yep.
And then, so where can you go?
Yeah.
Right. In the middle of the wilderness, in a cave for 26 years, unmolested by the state.
Yep.
Right up until the point they found out.
Yep.
And then they immediately go and molest this guy.
Like, oh, wait, we got to get this guy. He hasn't paid any taxes.
In 26 years.
Yeah.
And I got to say, anyone who's like, well, if you're so worried about nuclear war, why don't you leave, does not comprehend the nature of nuclear weapons.
Yes, like you can't run from a nuclear bomb.
They can put so much dust in the air that no plant gets to live. Yeah. And then we all starve.
Speaking of living in
Japan's
caves.
fine.
Speaking of living
Japan's
in caves.
fine.
No, Japan is not fine. If you block out the sun, we all die.
That's generally the consensus. There are some people who think that a minor subset of people would survive underground for some period of time, depending on how fortified and how far down their bunkers are, or if they escape to like caves and stuff like that.
Wishful thinking.
They may survive there. This is all may.
I'm just
M-A-Y.
saying the only country that has been hit by nuclear weapons in modern history, right, is currently doing just fine.
The country?
Japan.
Is it now?
Generally, yes.
Do you know anything about what's been going on in Japan?
Yeah, if there's a financial disaster waiting to happen that's bigger than the USD, I think it's Japan.
And you're saying that that's related to them being nuked in 1940s?
Yes. Yes, their financial situation has everything to do with their unconditional surrender to the United States.
Go on.
Well, everything that has existed in Japan for the last 60 years has been the effect of their unconditional surrender to the United States and the position that put them in world economic terms.
At one point in time, at least in the 80s, they were pretty high on the economic terms ladder, right? Like they're
relative to the United States.
They're a technological powerhouse. There's not all these mutated children like running around Japan.
And they're possibly going to die as a people based on the demographic shifts that have happened in their society.
Because the United States
way.
nuked them in 1940.
It's a big part of it, yeah.
Like 80 years, they had 80 years to figure this out. And you're saying like because they were nuked, they shifted their own demographic and didn't alter their public policy in any way to accommodate for it.
So Japan is fundamentally a warrior culture. And when you remove the army from the possibility of a warrior culture, then they have lost their identity. And once a culture has lost its identity, it can no longer effectively survive. And this has been the slow, painful death of Japan that happens when you take a warrior culture and tell them you're not allowed to have a military.
Okay.
I don't know enough about Japanese culture to speak intelligently about that. What I can say is that Japan is a state, just like every other country.
Okay.
Right? And it's making all the same horrible decisions that every other state is making. There's not a government on planet Earth that is not in debt.
Okay. Well, then I would suggest if that's the case, right, then the source of that is still not the 2 nuclear weapons that were dropped on Japan.
It might be they may have borrowed faster as a result in order to recover from the bombs.
Okay.
Right. So they may have gotten themselves into the monkey see, monkey do of every other state where now it's a central bank and they borrow from it and they tax the people and all that kind of crap. It may have accelerated their debt because of their recovery. I don't know that for a fact, but that's the only, I'm kind of grasping at straws here. That's the only thing I could think of was that they had to accelerate their borrowing to recover.
And at least through the 80s, technological financial powerhouse.
They certainly were. I know when computers were first coming out, right? Apple IIe and IBM and all that kind of stuff. It was Japan. Japan was blazing the trail for the rest of the world.
After having been bombed by 2 nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
40 years earlier.
I'm going to make the argument that they were not an economic powerhouse during the 80s. It's simply that the American system was showing its cracks during that period of time. That is where America went through the bust part of the cycle.
Like a bunch of plumbers.
Okay.
Showing its cracks.
But still, the technology, right, at that time, around the world, was mostly coming out of Japan. In a handful of different industries.
They're definitely, they have been and continue to be a technological powerhouse, for sure. But that doesn't make them an economic powerhouse, and it doesn't mean that they have a society that has a likelihood to continue forward.
Okay.
It's also funny that you mentioned that the warrior culture, like you can't pivot away from a warrior culture and survive. If we're trying to get to a peaceful society in a world of peace,
one would hope we could.
Well, then they ought to pivot, right, into something more peaceful.
And I kind of feel like they have. I mean, when's the last time you saw a group of samurai?
Right. Well, the Yakuza is still a thing, but whatever.
Yeah, okay, all right. But that's
and that's the thing. They haven't had the opportunity to pivot as a people. They were forced to stop their development.
Well, but being a technological powerhouse shortly thereafter means that they got back on track fairly quickly.
Yeah, but I think that had to do with just conforming.
Conforming to what? Everybody else can conform.
To statism, right? To the rest of the planet's version of statism, right? I think Japan was doing stuff differently.
As opposed to having an emperor?
Well,
basically, yeah.
Okay.
Benevolent dictator is still better than anything else on planet Earth, including the United States of America and their BS voting apparatus.
I mean,
popularity contest.
Fair enough. And if that's the claim, then they would have been even further along than they were, which was kind of peak in the 80s.
Yeah. I don't know enough. To really counter anything.
I don't think you have to know much. You just have to follow the logic.
Yeah, their entire identity since that event has been in relationship to the United States.
Okay.
Rather than having their own unique identity.
Got it. And if you're saying that they would have been better off keeping their own identity, right, then then that's the opportunity cost of where they are now, which is still way further along than a lot of other places.
What if a culture could pivot to something more peaceful, to something more voluntary, to something that didn't violate consent? Do you think that would be dangerous and ineffective?
You still got to defend it.
Libertarianism. This is from Medium.com. The belief that personal freedom is the highest value, government intervention is the worst, and the free market is the answer to all problems. That is not what libertarianism is.
No.
Just to make it clear, this author sounds like he doesn't get it already. It sounds good in theory, but in practice, it's dangerous and ineffective, according to this author.
Yeah, and you'll notice, as with pretty much every critique of libertarianism, they never want to take on the non-aggression principle. I mean, for all of the stupidity of his arguments, Skeeter will at least take on the non-aggression principle.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard to argue against the idea that is so intuitive that you figured it out in kindergarten.
Was taught to you in kindergarten, for that matter. It's just it was taught to you in different words.
Right.
Yeah.
But at least he tries to take on the actual idea, whereas something like this, they can't take on a simple, obvious idea that instead of hitting each other and threatening each other and stealing from each other, we should have voluntary interactions instead. They can't take that on. Instead, they're going to couch it in these terms of oh, well, you just think the market can solve everything. And it's well, if by the market you mean voluntary human interaction, yes, I think that voluntary human interaction can solve any problem.
Maybe I missed something because I thought I heard the same words that you guys said. Read what you said again. And then I want to know what specifically you guys take issue with as far as it being a part of libertarianism.
Okay. Well, so this author goes on. Okay, I'll read the first paragraph again. The belief that personal freedom is the highest value.
Okay.
We good with that?
Are we?
Is personal freedom the highest value?
No,
I don't
absolutely
think it's
not.
the highest value, but it is a value.
Okay.
So that's part of the issue, and plenty of people don't like this about libertarianism.
So qualifying it as the highest value, you object to.
Absolutely.
But personal freedom is high up there.
Yeah, it is a value.
Very high.
Okay.
But,
all right.
And this is one of the things that a lot of people hate about libertarianism is that, well, you don't have a suggestion of exactly what we should do. And you're right.
So
a libertarian can certainly have a value much higher than, like, service to God might be your highest value, and you be a libertarian. Or maybe it's eating as much chocolate as you can possibly eat in one lifetime, and that is your highest value. Both of those can exist in libertarianism.
Okay. So, number one, the belief that personal freedom is the highest value. That's, yeah.
All right.
Government intervention is the worst. Yeah, I mean, historically anyway.
Okay.
Like, it seems like
I'm just making sure I heard what you said right the first time.
All of the hugely bad stuff is a result of government, and to me, that makes it the worst.
All right. If we're going to argue degrees, fine. We
yeah,
can
so
argue
far,
degrees.
that is the part that I agree with the most.
And,
I have quibbles. But
and the free market is the answer to all problems. No. It's not the answer to all problems.
Well, I mean, we jokingly before the show went on the air was with Ernie Hancock's phrases, "Freedom's the answer. What's the question?"
Right.
Right. And when you have freedom in the market to solve problems, that's typically better than coercion.
Yeah, like, what do you mean by the free market?
That's a fair question.
If you mean voluntary human interaction, then yes,
right.
It is the solution to everything.
Okay.
Not a government-regulated market, which
but
is
let's see if the author
free.
defines it differently. Okay.
So then the author says, let's start by explaining what libertarianism really is, which I think we've just gone
over. That's funny. I thought you already did.
It's a political philosophy that advocates for minimal government intervention in economic and social affairs. I mean...
Any objections?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Yes. Okay, so first off, minimal is still existent.
Understood.
So, number two, libertarianism as compared to voluntarism, which is the most libertarian thing. So libertarianism argues that you should have less.
Okay.
Wherever you're at, you should have less government interference.
I mean, even the original declaration for the Free State Project, right, was limit the role of government to maximizing whatever.
To no greater than, whatever it was, defense, courts, etc.
Whatever.
And that gives us the
minimal role of government.
Well, my
even as defined by people who moved for the Free State Project.
My problem with this phrasing is stuff like all, right?
Okay.
It's a political philosophy that advocates for minimal government intervention in just these two areas, economic and social affairs. Right.
I mean,
that's kind of a broad umbrella that could cover most things, but human existence is far more than economic and social affairs.
Granted, but even again, the Cato's presentation of the freedom in the 50 states covers two areas, right? Personal freedom and economic freedom. Those are the two big ones.
But he also says that it advocates for minimal government intervention, and I don't know. Does it?
Yeah, no.
Does it advocate minimal?
No. The framing
because,
there.
For me, I advocate none.
Exactly.
But then again, I'm not necessarily a quote libertarian unquote. I'm an anarchist.
No. You are a libertarian. You happen to be an anarchist, which is a subcategory.
So it's kind of like whiskey. Like
right.
Not all bourbon. No, all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon.
Exactly.
And so all anarchists are libertarian, but not all libertarians are anarchists.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Because for the anarchists, the minimal is zero.
Right.
Right. For libertarians, it's like, well, maybe we do need public schools.
But that's not minimal. To me, that's none. That's different than minimal. Right.
Well, the minimum amount of alcohol you can drink in a night is zero.
Yeah, and with all of this, you
haven't drank any.
That's why it's zero.
That's not an amount.
Okay.
So it's minimal amount and not an amount are different.
All right.
And right here, you're already making things more complicated than you need to make them. What we're arguing for is less.
Okay.
Less government. Now, we can quibble amongst ourselves as to whether that means none or we should stop before none.
I was just thinking, man, there needs to be a politician whose name is like Lester, so that he can be like, less government.
No, because then you just call him Lester Molester, and it'd be an accurate statement.
Yeah. But one of the issues is that if we ever got to like the night watchman state or constitutionalism or what have you, now at that point, constitutionalists and minarchists would no longer be libertarians.
Oh my gosh, this next statement is just...
Okay.
They'd be centrists at that point.
All right.
Here we go. The author continues, the idea is that individuals should be free to make their own choices without government interference. So far, so good.
Yeah, yeah.
He continues, though, and says, but here's the thing. That sounds great if you're a wealthy individual with power and privilege. For the rest of us, it's not so great. He's arguing that your freedom to make your own choices without government interference is not so great because this guy isn't wealthy and he has no power or privilege?
Well, those of us who have less stuff would have to not steal it from you. And that's just not so great for the rest of us.
I feel like the first part is close enough. I mean, we're quibbling over very minute details.
No, that second part, though, is like, what? Come on, man. Like, as a poor person, which I have been many times in my life, particularly before I left the Seattle area, even though I was making what, is good money now, when I was living there, I was still frickin' poor.
Yeah. So here when
I got into the philosophy of freedom and the economic portion of it, all of a sudden I realized that it was up to me to make my life better. Nobody was going to come to my rescue and make it better for me. I had to take personal responsibility for improving my own life. And so with that came a great deal of mental freedom, because I was like, oh, I am free to do this. I don't have to wait on anybody else. I don't have to wait for times to change. I don't have to wait for government to interact. I don't have to sign up for a program. I need to make changes. I need to take the initiative. I need to make my life better. I need to improve my life. And the only person that's going to do it is me.
Yep.
So,
but Captain, you could just steal that from other people.
Oh, you could if you don't have it.
Yeah. But I'm, sorry.
You gotta go get it from someone that does.
I'm not a thief, yo. Sorry.
Well, this author is clearly about to make that argument, only they're going to make it sound a lot better than that.
Let's hear what this author has to say further. The dangers of libertarianism are many. When individuals are left to their own devices, inequality grows and society becomes more and more stratified. It's survival.
More stratified than having one group of people that get to monopolize violence and then the rest of us.
It's survival of the fittest, but instead of being based on actual strength, it's based on wealth and power. Oh, you mean like we have today with the state, where the wealthy and the powerful control everybody? This guy's a frickin' moron. Sorry, I'm getting upset.
Well, no,
they're good. That's why I picked it.
No, the author is clearly not taking into account that with the state in place, these wealthy people that they're so concerned about can buy politicians.
Right.
And do. And in fact, every politician gets bought by multiple rich people in order to do their bidding in office.
Yeah.
That's the system we have now.
It's amazing. Earlier today, we were talking about this old clip from Joe Biden in the 70s, where they asked him how politics works. And he admitted on air, on TV in the 70s, that it was basically lobbying. Well, whoever brings me the most amount of money, I'm going to favor them. And he got elected in the 70s by being honest about it.
Well, didn't Obama say that's
monopoly on force?
Yeah, government is a monopoly on violence.
Yep.
603-283-6160 if you'd like to join us. Hour number 3 of Free Talk Live still to come.
Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 13th through the 16th for the 8th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which has sold out in recent years. Fork Fest happens the weekend before the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Fork Fest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 13th through the 16th. You can find out more at the unofficial website, forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the Forkfest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the Forkfest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 13th through the 16th. forkfest.party.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone with The Week in Review. Israel has resumed its military operation in Gaza, accusing Hamas of violating a ceasefire after nearly a week of a pause in fighting. That truce had been due to expire after the release of dozens of hostages held by Hamas and prisoners from Israeli jails. As correspondent Sarah Coates reports from Tel Aviv, the resumption of hostilities will worsen the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Aid agencies say that conditions inside the Gaza Strip are deteriorating by the minute. They say they are catastrophic. And look, with this resumption of fighting, one can believe that they will only get worse, especially due to the overcrowding down in the south, with the military telling people to move there for their own safety.
India says a panel will investigate US prosecutors' allegations that an Indian government official was involved in a plot to assassinate a Sikh activist on US soil. Ishan Garg tells us more about the investigation from New Delhi.
Well, Indian government officials have said that they are constituting a panel to investigate this subject. They haven't given out the details of who is going to be present on the panel. And analysts say that it's not likely that the details of this investigation are going to come out into the public forum. They say Indian government now saying that this is against government policy. And they're also saying the fact that this goes against India's own national security interest is among the major reasons why they are going to investigate this case thoroughly.
A US lawmaker was dramatically expelled from Congress on Friday after his colleagues voted overwhelmingly to throw him out of the House of Representatives. The Republican Party's now former Congressman, George Santos, becomes the 6th person ever to be dismissed from the lower chamber, and the first one since the Civil War to be removed without having been criminally convicted. He's accused by an ethics report of exploiting his position for personal financial profit, allegedly stealing money from his own campaign to spend on Botox treatments, luxury fashion brands, trips to Las Vegas, and even purchases from the adult content site OnlyFans. Benji High has been following the saga that's gripped Washington for months.
A remarkable, often mystifying, short stint in Congress for the New York representative. A self-confessed terrible liar who's in the past admitted to fabricating details about his upbringing and education, George Santos has already been indicted for conspiracy, corruption, false statements, identity theft and credit card fraud. He pleaded not guilty weeks ago to the array of charges. He'd remained defiant, consistently refusing to resign, condemning multiple attempts to oust him from office as bullying, and branding the investigation into him as a disgusting smear. A vacancy in Santos's seat now gives Democrats the chance to flip it. Benji Higher, Washington.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. Russia's Supreme Court has upheld a ban on the international LGBTQ movement, which Moscow calls an extremist organisation. There is no such legal entity or movement in Russia, but human rights activists warn the ban could lead to an increase in harassment and persecution against LGBTQ people in Russia. Daria Bondarchuk reports from Moscow.
Russia's Supreme Court has granted the Justice Ministry's request to ban the so-called international LGBT movement. The hearing took place without a defendant because there's no such organization or entity in Russia. Pro-LGBTQ activists warn the absurdity of the case shouldn't overshadow the danger it poses. Daria Bondarchuk, Moscow.
And the former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has died at the age of 100. He was one of the most controversial figures in US foreign policy, serving under Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks reports.
Henry Kissinger was born in 1923 in Germany and moved to the United States when he was 15, his parents seeking to escape the Nazis. He became the most influential figure in American foreign policy for generations, the only man simultaneously to serve as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. He was Richard Nixon's right-hand man, winning the Nobel Peace Prize for secret negotiations that ended the Vietnam War. But critics accused him of war crimes over brutal American conduct in Cambodia and of moral bankruptcy in countries as diverse as Iran, Pakistan, Cyprus and Chile. Kissinger worked until his final days, recently opining on the crisis in Gaza, meeting President Xi Jinping in China just 4 months ago. His celebrity status saw a huge 100th birthday party in New York earlier this year. Both admired and reviled, he will be remembered as one of the most controversial figures in modern American history.
I'm Caroline Malone in Washington, and that was The Week.
Captain Actual America is overweight and hopelessly in debt, and the Richie Rich comic strip introduces a new, even gayer character. As if you needed another reason to remain in your isolated and socially degenerative cocoon, this is the Onion Week in Review, Comics Edition. Sources confirmed Tuesday that the Comic Book and Sci-Fi Expo Comic-Con was once again marred by BullyCon, an increasingly popular event held in the same convention space. Now in its 5th year, BullyCon reportedly drew more than 125,000 tormentors from across the nation, all of whom were bent on beating up and torturing those attending the many comic book, television, and movie panels at Comic-Con.
This got started, it was just a couple of friends who wanted to beat the shit out of some Joss Whedon fans, but now there are thousands of us, ruining Walking Dead panels, taunting Harry Potter nerds, and really making some video gamers' lives completely miserable. I don't necessarily need to travel to San Diego to slap a copy of Spider-Man out of some pussy's hands, but something really special about coming together with people who dig the same sort of cruelty you do.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
Welcome back. And
That's
thank
right.
you. That is right.
Dust the Doritos off your shirt and listen in.
Put down the chalupa. It's time for hour number 3 of tonight's edition of Free Talk Live.
How about you stop telling me what to do with my property?
Nerds.
We are kind of nerds, it's true. Freedom nerds, if you will. The telephone number, if you'd like to join us tonight, 603-283-6160. In the studio, it's myself, the captain.
Pigless Mountaineer.
And Richie Rich.
We've been talking about this obviously not libertarian written article from medium.com.
I want people to call in if they agree with this joker.
That claims the dangers of libertarianism are many.
And not you, skeezy.
When individuals are left to their own devices, inequality grows. Does it? Does it, though? Do you have evidence of this author?
Well.
And society becomes more stratified. What is stratified?
Even if inequality grew, not my problem.
Yeah.
Right? If I put more work, more labor, provide more value to society, and reap the benefits of that, then you, tough.
But, like, there's no such thing as equality.
Right.
Even one man is not equal to himself on different days.
Well said.
How can I be equal to anybody else? How can anybody else be equal to me? Like, all of the time. You can't do that from an institutional perspective.
Right.
You can't even do it from a human perspective.
So
In
equality
fact,
ought not be the goal.
Correct.
Yeah, there is only one way to make people equal. Kill them. Then they will all be equally dead. Short of that, we will never be equal. Except
all politicians should be equal.
Except we could have equal rights. And that right is unequal in its manifestation because we have different property. I've done different things with my life than you have. That gives me different rightful property than you.
Just for our readers who don't know, the meaning of stratified is formed, deposited, or arranged in stable layers or strata.
going to say for our hosts who don't know as well. Thank you.
Our host who didn't know?
No, I'm unless you're also talking about me.
No, I'm talking about me.
Okay, I know why you looked it up, but
to me, stratified means that guy's got a couple of Fender Stratocasters.
Okay,
right. These are guitars, right? Yeah. He's stratified, right?
Better than getting fendered.
Well, okay. So the author continues, it's survival of the fittest, but instead of being on an actual strength, it's based on wealth and power. No, it isn't. Oh my gosh, this author is so misguided. How is libertarianism based on wealth and power?
Yeah, that's a tough sell even amongst modern libertarians who aren't the wealthiest people around.
I could see how somebody gets exposed to something like anarcho-capitalism, right? And could be of the belief that it's based on wealth.
Okay.
Right, because of the capitalism portion of anarcho-capitalism, right? People will equate this to like the Ferengi from all the Star Trek, the reboots, not Enterprise, but Deep Space Nine, Voyager, that kind of a thing, where like the Ferengi are sort of the anarcho-capitalists, right?
Okay.
They're guided by the rules of acquisition, and like all they care is their gold-pressed Latinum bars, right? That's their number one thing that they care about is like, how much money am I making, and that kind of a thing.
I mean, if you want to increase like your lifestyle, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, you have to become wealthy to increase your lifestyle, yes. However, this author says it's based on wealth and power. Now, I don't know what he means by power.
It's clearly not power.
I assume political power is what he means here. And if that's the case, then no, that's not what libertarianism is based upon.
Yeah, this is a great argument if the only libertarians you've ever heard of are the Koch brothers.
Which for a lot of people, that's it, because they're the wealthy libertarians. They're the only wealthy libertarians that the general public can point at and go like, well, don't look at those libertarians.
Right.
It's nobody else. Like the crypto bros maybe, but most of them are like in hiding.
Right, yeah. And when the rich get richer, the article continues, when the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, it's not just morally bankrupt, it's also bad for the economy.
Agree.
And that's what's happening now. Like, he's describing what's happening now, not what happens with libertarianism.
There is literally only one way for the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer, and that's with force. Because if you take force out of the equation, the poor will also get richer.
Yeah. Anyway, the article continues. So sure, libertarianism may sound like a good idea, but when you scratch beneath the surface, it's really just an outdated political philosophy that only benefits those at the top. You mean like every other political philosophy? My God.
Democracy doesn't.
He goes on to say, libertarianism is a political philosophy that promotes individual freedom and a limited government, or, as I like to say, no government.
Yeah.
However, as appealing as it may sound, it is a dangerous and ineffective ideology that fails to address the complexities of modern society.
I was listening to a different podcast earlier today, and again, one of the hosts repeated the misinformation that you need government regulation to maintain a free market. You just want to reach to the phone, strangle him.
My God.
Now that sounds like a warm-up for some serious mental gymnastics.
Yep.
I was thinking of, is there an example of a free market that exists today that is available to the general public?
Well, whatever the current iteration of the Silk Road or
okay,
the dark web
and that was
is.
one of them I thought of, but I thought of another one.
Okay.
Craigslist.
All right.
That is an online marketplace that is, I mean, outside of the fact they made them take down the ads for hookers and porn and stuff like that. Like there used to be.
Craigslist voluntarily did that after Backpage got taken down.
They complied with authorities who were probably going to come after them and force them to take it down anyway. So they just were like, yeah, we don't want to deal with it, we'll just take it down. But
my percentage on casual encounters was very low to begin with, so I'm not missing much.
But my point is that here is an online marketplace that is completely unregulated otherwise. Right?
Well,
you could sell whatever you want on there.
Well, so try selling a massage.
Well, I can't because I don't have one to sell.
I think from personal experience, he's saying that he tried to offer his services on Craigslist. And was shut down.
As a result of the illegality of prostitution,
right? Yeah,
and the fact that you can't just go ahead and offer prostitution because it's illegal, and because people will use massage as a code word for prostitution, you thus cannot offer massage on Craigslist.
Pickless the prostitute.
I mean.
No.
Okay, there are caveats, but outside of that, like, Craigslist is the only place that I'm aware of online outside of the Silk Road or something, that you got to have Tor and, a bunch of secure stuff in order to access, right? Just like you just go to from any browser that has a little box you can check that says cryptocurrency okay. And if somebody is okay with taking cryptocurrency for whatever product they're selling, they will put that in their ad, and you can filter by that. And if you want to spend cryptocurrency buying stuff off Craigslist, you can.
That's true.
And that's
amazing.
So I'll caveat
but that doesn't quite make it a free market.
I'll say the freest market then.
Yeah.
Amongst other non-free markets.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
But as Pikla said, that's not the only category, right, that you're not allowed, and they will block, and they have algorithms that prevent. And
right.
Anyway, this guy goes on to say more crap. It says libertarianism, with its emphasis on individualism, fails to recognize the importance of cooperation and collective action in society.
We couldn't possibly, more than one of us do a thing without being forced to.
How does he come to the conclusion that it fails to recognize the importance of cooperation? I mean, if I have an idea for a new product, right, and I want to put that product out on the market, I'm going to need to cooperate with a bunch of people to make that happen.
Right.
Yes, and I think that's extra to libertarianism.
What do you mean?
That exists regardless of your political environment.
Okay.
No. So cooperate being the key word there. So if you use the power of the state to simply coerce people into doing what you want, then you can get a bunch of people to, say, build your product.
I got it. But under our current status paradigm, if I come up with the idea for a new product, I do have to cooperate regardless of whether or not I'm a libertarian.
No. Again, if your product is something that you can get the state to coerce people to do, then you don't have to cooperate with anyone.
Yes, and I would still have to cooperate with someone, even if that's the state.
Well, okay, yeah, that's true. And in fact, many businesses are forced, if you will, to cooperate with the state.
And let's also be realistic. As a new entrepreneur, your first move is not, let me go get the state's permission to shut down my competitors, right? Like, that happens later as you get bigger and more involved with the state.
No, that is not true. So, hold on. So, patents.
Yep.
In their absolute fundament are that, getting the power of the state to shut down your competitors.
Okay.
Before they even exist.
And before
that's how patent law works.
Before you get the patent, you have to cooperate with the manufacturer to get a prototype made.
These are facts.
Unless you put a gun to their head.
Which you wouldn't do because you don't have the back end of the state yet.
And you probably want to use that guy again to, after you get your patent, to go ahead and start production.
Maybe.
What
There's some places that are just...
What if you're just a senator and you're like, this is a great idea. You build this, or you will anger me, a senator. They will probably, and this isn't cooperation doing it, but they will probably do exactly what you want, sir.
You can come up with all these examples, and I don't believe that that's how the average entrepreneur starts their business.
I'm just going to read this author's next paragraph, and then I'm done reading this story. He says, libertarianism, with its emphasis on individualism, fails to recognize the importance of cooperation and collective action in society. Extreme individualism, which libertarianism promotes, can lead to selfishness and a disregard for the common good.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, though.
Can it? Extreme individualism? What's that?
Well,
as opposed to individualism?
Anything that is not laid down in the Communist Manifesto.
Is that a bunch of individuals drinking Mountain Dew? It's extreme.
No. That's a bunch of individuals going off grid and farming for their family alone.
That's extreme.
That's extreme.
No, that's just how it's been done for thousands of years.
No, well, at some point, you overproduce and you trade with your neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not extreme individualism anymore. That's cooperation with the neighbor.
Yes, and common good.
Well, common good is usually defined by those in charge. So
okay,
the way he's using common good means that, you know, if I don't want to sell to the starving guy,
right,
I don't have to, but but society would be better off if I gave him food.
Right, but in your example of, you know, a bunch of people off grid, you know, overproducing, and so now they're trading with their neighbors.
Yep.
Their neighbors are, well, part of the common.
Sure.
And they're doing a solid with their neighbors because now both parties win in the transaction.
Yep. But
so
once you
that's
once you start doing that, though, you're no longer extreme individualist.
Oh, I see. You put down the Mountain Dew.
And here's the thing.
I got so much Mountain Dew at my house that I didn't even realize I had.
Really?
Just sitting under a table like, look at all of this goodness.
Are you an extreme individualist?
It's some pretty vibrant colors in the box there. I'm going to have to drink some.
Well, and these are the misconceptions we have to deal with, right? So that it is fundamentally individualist is actually not true. You can be as collectivist as you want. You just can't use threats to do it.
As long as it's voluntary.
Right. And the common good is exactly why we want a consistent set of rules.
From who? From who?
Everyone.
Oh, okay.
Everyone. The consistent set of rules of property rights applying to everyone, for everyone. That is what we believe will be the common good.
Enforced by?
Everyone.
All right.
I feel like this article...
Who voluntarily wants to enforce it.
I feel like this...
Possibly through being paid as a security force.
I feel like this article...
And possibly just through being your neighbor.
Was written by, like, somebody like Scooter.
Who's the author? Maybe it is Scooter.
It was written by somebody calling themselves Homeless Romantic.
Okay, so it could be Scooter.
PhD rocket surgeon and aspiring troglodyte.
Definitely not Scooter then.
Why?
Rocket surgeon?
Well, and certainly not a PhD. Although whether or not this person is a PhD, right? You know.
Okay.
Brain scientist, rocket surgeon, right?
Whatever.
You know, that's the joke.
Okay.
Right? All right, moving along. Oh, we wanted to talk about this.
Okay.
This.
I tried.
Let me find it. What?
Whatever Peakless had for FinCEN or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Do you still have that? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Is it on the tip of your fingers?
More or less.
Or should I babble on for a minute or so that you can find it?
Just vamp for a moment.
Some of the headlines this week that haven't, really made it to
the speed run, the headline speed run.
Well, we're going to cherry pick.
Okay.
The James O'Keefe releases bombshell undercover report exposing China's operation of a biolab in California.
Okay.
What could possibly go wrong?
It would be called the American virus instead of the Wuhan flu.
Right.
It'll be called like the...
instead of the American-run virus factory in China?
Instead of COVID, it's like avocado.
Okay.
California roll. Something like that.
California virus toast.
That one really gets me. Why is China operating a biolab in California, like, at all?
Because they bought the land and set it up, and that's part of the American dream, is that anyone's allowed to do that, even if it's a foreign national.
I'm pretty sure that's not legal.
Go on.
So, for example, we have some pretty strict rules regarding what kind of research you're allowed to do and what you're not. Basically coming down to you're not allowed to make bioweaponry.
Okay.
And
well, it's a biolab. Doesn't say they're exclusively using it for weaponry.
Okay.
They could be using it to come up with more number 2 stories for our Sunday edition of Free Talk Live.
I mean, okay. So the United States is generally more restrictive on scientific research than China.
Fact.
Okay. So if they were doing something so egregious, right, in the bioweapons manufacture, whatever, they ought just stay in China than raising ire in America.
Yeah.
And they know from the Wuhan flu, right, that if they develop it in China, they can still distribute it in America. Wasn't all that difficult. So I'm not overly concerned, right? You have an international corporation with a facility in the United States. Sounds pretty reasonable to me.
How about this headline that didn't make it in the mainstream media? Joe Rogan says anyone who tells him to trust the experts can yes, can perform oral sex upon him.
Okay.
COVID taught him that the so-called experts are all bought and paid for.
Yeah.
On one hand, I'd like to think that Joe Rogan knew that before COVID, but it's his own statement.
Joe Rogan is an independent thinker, right? On the one hand, he says some very libertarian things on occasion.
Yep.
And then he went and endorsed Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
I
know. But I'd like to think that he was aware that the so-called experts are all bought and paid for
ahead of time
before COVID, right?
Yeah.
Like he sort of had an inkling, had some clue prior to that. But if he didn't, more power to him.
That's the transition from conspiracy theory to conspiracy fact, right? I have a gut feeling that everything isn't on par, right? And then COVID hits and you go I knew it.
Now there's evidence.
Now there's evidence.
Right. Okay.
I don't need a gut feeling anymore. Now I have evidence.
Did you find the thing?
I didn't.
What are we talking about, Peakless?
So this from the Federal Register. Proposal of special measure regarding convertible virtual currency mixing as a class of transactions of primary money laundering concern.
The coin mixing apps.
That's a whole lot of words.
It is. So that's from the government. They don't like being parsimonious.
What's the layman's translation there?
They are suggesting that they regulate cryptocurrency in this way.
In what way? How are they
if you mix your currencies, through one of those currency blenders,
sure,
to hide the source or endpoint, right? Then you are participating in money laundering.
Oh, but isn't that what government does?
It is.
I see.
Rules for thee, not for me.
Exactly. And of particular concern to me on this one is single-use wallets. So, for those of you not familiar with cryptocurrency technology, there's this thing called a wallet that at some point has to be a single-use wallet. At first, there is a potential address that has never been used before, and there's an unbelievable number of these. And then at some point, you use that address. And they are seeking to regulate that.
The use of that address.
Right.
Okay.
The single use of address, because it creates an unnatural chain that obscures the origin of this money.
Does it?
Well, in theory.
Okay.
I mean, it can make it more difficult to track down where this money originally came from and whether it's one of these terrorists that had originally done it. Problem is, if they get the power to do this, they're just going to have the ability to stop new wallets from being made.
Okay. Well, that's powerful right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the rule that they are currently taking comment on, by the way, and will be for another, 50 some odd days, and I really hope as many people as possible tell them this is a bad idea.
Is there somewhere you can direct our listeners to make a comment?
Yes, but it's probably easier to just Google convertible virtual currency.
Okay.
And then go to the Federal Register site.
All right.
All right, go on.
Yeah, so the other issue is that the other issue that I have a problem with is being able to move from one, as they call it, virtual currency, which is wrong, to another. So being able to move from Monero to Dash, from Dash to Bitcoin, from Bitcoin to Bitcoin Cash. Well, that too is a way of obscuring the origin. So they want to stop that.
I mean, isn't that what those coin mixers do, though? It's to obscure something. Otherwise, you don't need to do it.
Yeah, that's also on the list. Okay. And I can at least see the argument on that one, and I'm not going to raise a fuss on that one. but they are literally trying to illegalize the creation of new wallets and the use of any new currency.
I got it, but converting Bitcoin to Monero makes it more private, that makes it harder to find, and that's the goal of Monero.
603-283-6160. More Free Talk Live is coming up.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone with The Week in Review. Israel has resumed its military operation in Gaza, accusing Hamas of violating a ceasefire after nearly a week of a pause in fighting. That truce had been due to expire after the release of dozens of hostages held by Hamas and prisoners from Israeli jails. As correspondent Sarah Coates reports from Tel Aviv, the resumption of hostilities will worsen the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Aid agencies say that conditions inside the Gaza Strip are deteriorating by the minute. They say they are catastrophic. And look, with this resumption of fighting, one can believe that they will only get worse, especially due to the overcrowding down in the south, with the military telling people to move there for their own safety.
India says a panel will investigate US prosecutors' allegations that an Indian government official was involved in a plot to assassinate a Sikh activist on US soil. Ishan Garg tells us more about the investigation from New Delhi.
Well, Indian government officials have said that they are constituting a panel to investigate this subject. They haven't given out the details of who is going to be present on the panel. And analysts say that it's not likely that the details of this investigation are going to come out into the public forum. They say Indian government now saying that this is against government policy. And they're also saying the fact that this goes against India's own national security interest is among the major reasons why they are going to investigate this case thoroughly.
A US lawmaker was dramatically expelled from Congress on Friday after his colleagues voted overwhelmingly to throw him out of the House of Representatives. The Republican Party's now former Congressman, George Santos, becomes the sixth person ever to be dismissed from the lower chamber, and the first one since the Civil War to be removed without having been criminally convicted. He's accused by an ethics report of exploiting his position for personal financial profit, allegedly stealing money from his own campaign to spend on Botox treatments, luxury fashion brands, trips to Las Vegas, and even purchases from the adult content site OnlyFans. Benji Hire has been following the saga that's gripped Washington for months.
A remarkable, often mystifying, short stint in Congress for the New York representative. A self-confessed terrible liar who's in the past admitted to fabricating details about his upbringing and education, George Santos has already been indicted for conspiracy, corruption, false statements, identity theft and credit card fraud. He pleaded not guilty weeks ago to the array of charges. In spite of mounting political and judicial pressure, he'd remained defiant, consistently refusing to resign, condemning multiple attempts to oust him from office as bullying, and branding the investigation into him as a disgusting smear. A vacancy in Santos's seat now gives Democrats the chance to flip it in their favour.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Yes, it is Free Talk Live.
Go on.
We are on.
The live
Yes.
Saturday edition.
Robot Captain broke down there for a second.
I was having a thought.
Don't hurt yourself.
And then it escaped me.
Oh, okay.
It got away scot-free. I'm not sure what happened. I'm going to have to call security, see if the thought dug out a tunnel underneath the...
As long as it didn't leave a getaway trail in
Viet Cong style.
Whatever, yeah.
So to respond to your, well, doesn't that obscure it? That's true.
Yeah.
Using a mixer does obscure the Bitcoin that you're spending.
I just had an idea.
But you can use it without a mixer.
Okay.
Whereas you can't use it without a wallet.
All right.
Whenever they're done making all the King Kong movies, because there's been a bunch of them.
They're not going to be done.
I'm just saying that whenever society is really another King Kong, they can reinvent the entire genre by just having it based in Vietnam, and it could be called Viet Cong with a K.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think your brain was trying to save us from that one.
No.
I don't think you lost it. I think it got ejected.
It got rejected.
You said Viet Cong, and my brain was like King Kong? And then I'm like, oh, what if King Kong was in Vietnam? You could make
It would be Viet Cong, but with a K.
It's not quite a portmanteau, but it's kind of, because I'm taking two things and combining it together as one.
I'll tell you what, that would have made a difference in the Vietnam War.
Agent Orange? Screw you, we've got Viet Cong. Come storming through the jungles, right? Stepping on everybody.
The sad thing is the Monsterverse is one of the hardest movie universes to keep track of.
Yeah. I did recently see a King Kong versus Godzilla.
That's part of the Monsterverse.
Yeah, and it was pretty good.
Okay.
The script was, but the fight scenes between the Godzilla and the King Kong monsters were pretty damn good. I was like, yeah, all right. Now, I'm old, too, so I remember when, the fight scenes between King Kong and Godzilla were,
claymation.
Super close-up frame, the fire barely, scorched the toy that had, some fur glued onto it, so, horrible practical special effects. So, what they've got today is superior. Anyway, I didn't mean to detract from the rest of your story. We were talking about this business of crypto mixing, which is just it's kind of exchanging, right? You're exchanging one for another, but you're making it so that it's not traceable on the blockchain.
Right. So the way a Bitcoin mixer works, I send my Bitcoin into this. They take Bitcoin from a bunch of other people who also want theirs mixed, and they do a different transaction, and then they send it out. So that it obscures where this originally came from.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be Bitcoin in, Bitcoin out, right? It could be Bitcoin in Monero out, Bitcoin in Dash out. It could be
that wouldn't be a mixer.
Oh, really?
That wouldn't be a mixer, but that would be covered. That would be covered on this regulation that they are suggesting.
Well, screw regulation.
Okay. So here's the question then: if it weren't for the government in general, would we have a need for these services?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. So
why would we need a mixer without government?
Because we want privacy.
The obvious
well, who's going to track you? Who's going to track you?
Anybody.
All right.
So once I've found out this is your wallet, I might want to know everyone you've ever done any amount of business with. Okay. So if, for example, I don't like you, and I want to punish you, then I can get at you indirectly from punishing all of the people who have ever dealt with you ever.
Right. If you're insecure,
might not like that.
If you're insecure about your use of cryptocurrency or unprivate, if you will, and I don't mean that you're broadcasting your transactions. Right. I just mean that you're not taking any steps. You have one wallet. You're just using that wallet all the time. It's your wallet. You don't have any other wallets. You're not. You know what I mean?
I've got nothing to hide.
Right. Then all of your transactions could be visible, not necessarily traced back to you as an individual, but all your transactions could be visible in the same way that, when you go on vacation from your house, you generally call up the post office or go online. You're like, hey, don't be delivering my mail for a couple of weeks because I don't want to make myself a target.
Right.
Right. So in that, I think that's kind of what you're saying is hey, I'm doing transactions, but I don't want just anybody to be able to trace back my transactions, know how much I'm spending, what frequency I'm spending it, maybe even who I'm spending it with, that kind of a thing. I don't want people to know, like, if you have any wealth at all, you don't want to broadcast that, right?
If that's the case, right, then you ought not use Bitcoin, because that's the public ledger.
But this way you can use Bitcoin and have privacy.
All right.
Privacy is important.
Yeah. So that is one of the uses of Mixer in absence of the government.
All right.
But yeah, I will definitely say that while there is a violent coercive monopoly who does not want any economic activity performed on Earth that they do not also get a part of, then yeah, that's the primary use case.
Okay. So being that that's the primary use case under the current paradigm, it makes sense that they would then try to stop that or make that illegal.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I get why they're saying, hey, no using a mixer. I disagree, but I at least get why they're doing that.
Okay.
Whereas it's blatant overreach to say you cannot have a new wallet because it is possible to use a new wallet to obscure a transaction.
How are they going to stop that? How are they going to prevent somebody from making a new wallet?
Well, I imagine that they would use your internet access to find out where you live and then put you in jail for doing that.
Okay, but like there's enough things out there that I'm aware of, and I'm just a guy, right, that I'm aware of that like I could create as many wallets as I wanted today, and I'm pretty sure no government could track it.
So,
well, and at the moment, this isn't being enforced. This is a proposed rule change.
Yeah, I get it.
Now, if this rule change happens, they might very well be very interested in who's making wallets and why they're making them.
So, again,
but I mean, that's like trying to prevent people from making more than one Twitter profile.
There
or Facebook profile. Like nothing prevents people from just making a new Facebook profile.
And if they decided that, for example, the post office now governs making a second Twitter profile, then they might very well come after you at your home for making a second Twitter profile.
So again, like their technology is sophisticated, right? So I was listening to a different show earlier today.
Okay.
And they were bringing up some of the technology used to track down the protesters at the January 6th quote unquote insurrection.
Right.
And a lot of the starting point for the data that they collected was publicly available cell phone records.
Right.
And they tracked these cell phone records that they bought from whoever ran the towers.
Right.
Even though a bunch of those protesters were using burner phones.
Right.
Because they were still calling the same normal people that they would normally call. So they built they had the algorithm run, and they had all these lists of known associates with these phone numbers and these phone numbers and where they were, because the cell phone kind of triangulates the data,
right,
and how many of them were like activated in the same area or had an area code out of state but activated within the state, like Washington, D.C.,
right,
to the point where, like, after they crunched the numbers, they were fairly confident that they had identified like 85 or 90% of the protesters there, even though they did their best to obscure who they were.
And we know that technology exists from previous topics that we've covered here on Free Talk Live, such as how marketing people use cell phone data that is anonymous. In other words, not tied to a single person, but like when you go to a department store and you walk around, because you're on their Wi-Fi, if you connect to it or when you connect to it, they can tell that, oh, you stopped at this end cap to look at this thing on sale. You looked at the blue shoes that are on aisle 4. You looked at camping gear down aisle 12, whatever it is, right? They know this information. We'll call it anonymously, but then if they get further data that they can use to extrapolate who that person is, they can tie it to you directly.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you know who has a lot of that information on me? Like my cable provider, my internet provider.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they offer the Wi-Fi hotspot wherever you go.
Yeah.
Right.
And it auto logs me in wherever I go.
Mm-hmm. And they've introduced new legislation to give tremendous control over the internet to make sure that no one's being racist with their internet providing. which means that they have an excuse to look into the very specific details of your particular internet usage.
It's interesting that they do that now, because one of my gripes about the internet was that you had to pay for multiple on-ramps.
Okay.
Right? You needed internet at your house, but then you needed a data plan on your phone, and then maybe you got to use Wi-Fi because your provider doesn't provide you with Wi-Fi or whatever it is. So now you've got multiple.
You go to Starbucks, you got to log in to Starbucks. You go to McDonald's, you got to log in to McDonald's.
Right. And so
use your own data. It's your phone provider getting the information.
Right. I just wanted to pay for the internet once and have it available to me on all of my devices.
Right.
Right, which seems to be coming to fruition, but now I'm not so sure that that's the right way.
Well, that's one company getting all your information.
Right.
If you pay for your data on your phone, and that's like your data plan, and then you turn that into a hotspot at home for your other devices,
right?
Then you have one data service, one on-ramp.
Well, okay, but that doesn't suit my needs. I have to have
higher speeds.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So the issue with this one. So since the blockchain is publicly available, they can just look, and every single time that a wallet that has never received anything receives something, then they go, okay, hunt down this transaction. How did that get onto the ledger? Okay, well, that was received by this node. Okay, where did it come from? And unless you are going, unless you're going through Molvad, then every VPN provider is probably going to keep some amount of record as to who they're providing services for.
You should probably define Molvad.
Oh, Molvad. It's a virtual private network that absolutely destroys all of their records every single time. And that you can get on using Monero. So completely anonymous.
Nice.
Yeah, Molvad does amazing work. But anyone who's not doing that, they have some amount of records, so they can go, okay, well, this transaction came from here, it came from this VPN, and this VPN, okay, we're going to go to them and put some pressure on them to give us the information, and suddenly they're at your house saying you created a new wallet.
Right.
That is illegal.
And if you think that's like out of the realm of possibility or fiction, right, there are vans that drive around England looking for people who don't have a TV license.
Right, I know. And in fact, there's vans that drive around the United States right now that they're not looking for TV license. But what they are doing is they're using your wireless router to take snapshots of the interior of your house with you in it.
Okay.
Because they can do that. So they don't really need your cable provider's permission, your internet provider's permission to do it. It's all part of the Patriot Act. It's all, legal, if you will.
Oh, that's what's authorizing this, by the way.
Patriot Act?
Yeah. Title 311 on the Patriot Act is what they're using for
this.
I
was surprised.
Yeah.
The least patriotic thing ever written.
Well, they'll never come after us. They'll only go after the terrorists.
Didn't they catch the terrorists already? Can they stop auto-renewing that thing?
No, wouldn't that be nice?
They didn't catch the terrorists. If they did, every member of Congress and Senate would be in jail.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Gee, it's almost like I was screaming my head off about this when they passed the Patriot Act and telling the Republicans that this was going to be used to come after them.
They were all like, no, it's temporary. It's fine.
Remember when there was like the We Will Not Fly protest? When they first set up the TSA?
I'm still basically there. I mean, I've
lucky.
flown a couple of times. I've flown a handful of times since then, but I didn't fly for a long time, man. I mean, and I try not to fly as often as possible.
I got it, but no one's protesting it anymore. It's not really a thing. It kind of
wouldn't that be nice?
It kind of just came, and then we still got to get to LA.
Obviously, it wasn't popular enough to put enough pressure that they stopped.
Hey guys, we're having a no-fly protest in New York, so everybody get on a plane, fly out here.
Yeah,
right.
There are no slow boats out of Hawaii, so I was a little hamstrung there.
Slow boats out of Hawaii,
dude. You know what you should have done? You should have taken a submarine.
Okay.
That would have been cool.
At one point, I considered like a cruise. Like, let's just get on one of those cruises that get you to Alaska.
Yeah, or California.
Or whatever.
How many commercially available submarines are there coming in and out of Hawaii?
I expect in Hawaii there are at least 2 that you could charter.
Huh.
And I only say that because I know that there's also, thanks to Magnum PI, there's helicopters you could charter.
Okay.
But you're still flying.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I know there's a
you
lot
have
of
to go through TSA.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
there's a
That's
lot
the
of,
only way around TSA is you have to, have access to a plane.
There's a lot of deep sea exploration that happens off of Hawaii. And so I know that they have private submarines, so non-government submarines. Generally, they're deployed in, co-government action where they're trying to explore if they want to lay cable for the new internet between Hawaii and the United States or something like that. They're going to use these contract out to these private submarines.
Laying the cable.
Laying cable. That's right. Here on Free Talk Live.
So part of my concern with this proposed rulemaking is that if this goes through, that gives them complete legal justification to shut down every coin exchange in the world.
Well,
and wouldn't they love that much power? And the exchanges will comply because that's what they do.
I still feel like tech is ahead of the government curve, right?
Yes.
And it has been, and I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. So the more government tries to do these things, or regulate, otherwise interfere or prevent things from happening.
Yeah, this isn't going to stop it, but it is going to slow it down. And here's the thing. If our consent were not important, then they wouldn't spend all of the resources that they do on what they call education and what they call media.
I think that these things are actually going to make cryptocurrency more valuable.
The illusion of consent is important. They're going to do it anyway.
It's a matter of when. Right. So if there's pushback, then they pull back.
Right.
So when they started making the Ministry of Truth, or whatever they were calling that thing.
They call it the Ministry of Truth.
Like the disinformation, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. When they started creating that, there was a massive pushback.
Yeah.
So they pulled back on that. Now, that's not to say that, in a few years or 10 years or whatever, that they're not going to do this again.
Right.
They will.
Or they just change the title to something a little less ominous and they still collect whatever data.
Right. But every time, if there's enough pushback, then they try a different route. And this is worth putting a little bit of pushback since they're giving you the opportunity to write in and tell them this is a bad idea.
How much pushback do they need? Because I remember the quantitative easing, the bailouts.
Yeah.
Right. That was pushed back a lot.
Right.
Like 98% of the calls to the senator's offices were like, don't do it.
Right.
Right. And then they went, okay, we've heard you.
Well, we're going to do it anyway.
Oh, so, the 2008 bailouts, you mean?
Is that when it was? I don't remember the timing.
The bank bailouts, the TARP program?
Any of the
could
QE.
Have been.
It could have been QE, QE1, QE2,
yeah,
QE3, whatever.
Any one of the bailouts, there was like massive pushback, the too big to fail one, whichever one that was.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. And people wrote into the Congresses, they called the offices.
Yep.
The calls were overwhelmingly no, don't do it.
Right.
To the tune of like 98%. And they did it anyway.
Yep.
And then people got all up in arms. I can't believe they didn't listen to us. And on this show, we went, well, you should have known better, and hopefully you'll know better next time that they don't care.
Well, and look what the response was. The creation of the Tea Party on one side and the creation of Occupy Wall Street on the other. So they paid the price for that. Now, granted, there are certain moves that they make that no amount of pushback is going to dissuade them.
This is a financial move.
I don't think this is one of those moves.
Okay.
I think this is one of those that they're trying to sneak in the back door. And if enough people go, hey, I caught you, they'll go, okay, we'll do this in a month.
If you sneak it in the back door, they just put it on the military funding bill, and then you're unpatriotic or un-American if you vote against it.
My thoughts on this right now is that the content of what they're trying to do is of a technical nature for the layman to wrap their head around.
Right.
And because of that, no one really understands this. And I mean the common folk, right?
Mm-hmm. And they're doing it in the early stages of cryptocurrency where there's not a majority of people who even care yet.
Right. So like the ability to have the pushback, I don't think exists because of the level of dumbness, the lack of education on this particular subject amongst the majority of the population.
I think that's what they're testing. And that's exactly why I think this is sensitive to pushback. I think that there are so few people who are likely to get this that that's what they're testing. Yeah. They're like, do you see what we're doing here? Or will this be invisible to you? So if a certain number of people say, I see what you're doing there, and it's abominable, they'll go, oh, they can see that. We better try something more invisible if we're going to do this.
I
should have done it sooner.
I got a real life, I don't know what the right word is, a real life barometer of how the government and the media, the propaganda they put out, has affected cryptocurrency amongst non-crypto people. Mm-hmm. So we're at the Social Sunday last week, 2 weeks ago, and I walk outside to leave, and Breaking the Flaw is out there, and he's talking to some rando girl, right? And he says something about, cryptocurrency, and he's like, hey, Captain, she doesn't like cryptocurrency because she thinks it's shady. And I go, oh, how come? And she recites I saw something on the news, or I read something in an article or whatever.
That Sam Bankman-Fried character.
Yeah, that sounds like, crypto is just kind of shady. And I'm like, okay, but do you know what a really shady currency is compared to crypto? She's like, no, what? I'm like, the United States dollar. And she's like, oh, yeah. So, people know that the United States dollar is also, shady. Not also, but is shady in and of itself. But they somehow have been convinced that crypto is more shady than the violent-based
no, I don't think
currency.
that's what it is at all.
There's a lot of shady crypto.
They know that the United States dollar is shady, but they have to have it.
Right.
If you don't have dollars, you go to jail. So they will accept the fact that it's shady because they're being coerced. Whereas Bitcoin or Monero or Dash or what have you, they don't have to have that. No one's going to put them in jail for not having enough Bitcoin cash. So that is an option. So they go, do I want to be part of that? So it being shady matters, whereas the U.S. dollar being shady doesn't matter because they'll kill you.
Yeah. I mean, fair. That's one of the benefits, right, of coercion. It's harder to get away from.
Yeah.
You have to actually convince people positively to engage in cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to do that with the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And they stole the dollar, right? Like I mentioned earlier in the show, I didn't look it up.
Yeah.
But the dollar has a definition, within the U.S. code, and it's 300 some all grains of silver. That's the definition of a dollar.
Wow.
It's grains of silver.
Even though it says dollar right on
it's like an ounce?
It's not. No, it's not an ounce. It's against.
It's not an ounce.
It's 300. Look it up. I mean, not right now, but in general.
No, go ahead, do it.
Okay, look at it. We got a little bit of time. Go ahead and look it up. It's like the Coinage Act of 1792 or something. But the U.S. dollar is defined in grains of silver. It's not been repealed. It's not been anything. So what you have in your pocket, right? That paper, that greenback piece of paper in your pocket, is not even a dollar as defined by the United States. It's a Federal Reserve note.
Yeah, that is just the shadiest thing. More crime, more murder, more death, more theft, more extortion. I can't think of any of the other top 7 sins, but more of that is perpetuated by the U.S. dollar than all of the cryptocurrencies combined.
Yep.
So when you're thinking about currency out there, listeners, keep that in mind, because they are using violence to gain your compliance.
And if you want to get away from the hyperinflation that's looming, I won't say on the horizon because they always figure out a way to push it out, right? There's the non-inflationary cryptocurrency called Bitcoin that is probably a good place to protect yourself currently.
Yeah, in fact, inflation is such, I don't know what the difference between inflation and hyperinflation is.
The speed at which it increases.
Yeah. Okay, but it's getting pretty fast now. You already can't save without having it lose a bunch of its value within a year.
$11,000 more this year than 2 years ago.
And that's why we use the carrot, they use the stick.
We're out of time. Thank you to all of our listeners, all of our callers. Thank you, Richie Rich. Thank you, Peakless Mountaineer, for joining me tonight. Peace.
Thank you for great money-saving ideas. I'm Holland Cook with Inflation Hacks. Among recent suggestions submitted to the blog, double-check your checking and bank accounts for those trial subscriptions and memberships that have become permanent if you don't cancel them, which many, possibly most, don't or forget to. You may not have noticed small automatic payments. 2 energy-saving tips for the kitchen. If you cover and wrap foods in the fridge, you will prevent moisture from escaping and ask less of the